Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is July 4th, YC127, and Zoria has totally hijacked my seat. She's sitting in my seat right now, so I'm trying to make things work. I also just recently just changed the levels, so somebody's gonna have to let me know if the levels are working, but I'm also not sitting exactly where I'm supposed to because I've got a puppy here. So puppy tax early, yay. Happy 4th of July to those who celebrate. We have some news to go over today. I recently, we did the video like last week where we talked about stuff. Oh yeah, and this is the Eve Universe show. Sorry, almost forgot that. Probably spiked it at that point. Let me know if that was bad. Like I said, I turned up my volume, so I might need to adjust some things. I don't know whether or not it's working, but whoop. Something happened. Zoe's on the move. What's up? How you doing? Where are you going? You just going to stand up and take everybody's attention? Definitely spiked. Okay, well, I'll work on it. We'll figure it out. So we do have some news today. I kind of have 4 different segments to go over today. We want to go over they posted a video, a dev interview about the new Plex trade stuff, and I saw Nth Dimensional did a reaction video on it, and I watched enough of it to realize that I also want to do a reaction video on it, so we're going to do that. We have the scope video about 1DQ. I want to highlight the compare tool, the new compare tool, and I will point this out a few times in the next like today. CCP is currently doing a giveaway, or like a Twitch stream giveaway that's sort of annoying. Hey, Ragtag, thank you for that membership. So you have to watch only the CCP stream. So it'll behoove you to kind of keep track of whether or not the Eve stream is on, and they're having other people allowed to stream on the CCP stream. But like, there's a Rattlesnake Galnet skin, which we can pull up. The Galnet Dreamcast skin is pretty popular amongst those who like it. It's kind of fancy. So the only way to get this is through the Galnet, or by watching Twitch streams, and specifically CCP. Well, no, you're talking about if you watch CCP stream, you get points, channel points, loyalty points, or whatever. You can redeem like 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever loyalty points to get a random Galnet skin. But there's also a drop right now where if you watch EVE Online, okay, that's fair. But for the rest of the audience, if you watch the EVE Online stream, or like the CCP EVE Online stream for 4 hours, you will get this skin. So it's nice. It's pink. It's got some cool effects. It is for the Rattlesnake, which is sort of a fancier ship. It does have some other good skins, but a lot of those other good skins are going to be hard to get. So unless you're getting it through like, unless you like Vampire Hex, or you've got like your cool skin from the Paragon Hub, like Etheric Raiders, you're not going to get anymore. Empyrean Outlaws, you might be able to still get pretty easily. Obviously, some of these other ones. Helmet's Harrier is kind of like, if you like that, that was like, I think the Easter one for a long time. King's Ransom, I think, is like one of the best for Rattlesnake just because of its lore. But all that said, the Galnet Dreamcast skin, or Streamcast skin, looks really good. And the Rattlesnake is a very good, especially like mission running ship, but also all around good ship. So I'd strongly recommend, if you can, watch CCP stream for 4 hours in the next 3 days. And, you know, make sure that it is your tab, your active tab. Right now, they are going for 50 million, and that's while they're available. So expect that price to go up. Let's just let's look at other Gal Knight skins, although this is a little bit different because these can be gotten randomly from the from the drops, or from you know, the boxes. But yeah, so I would expect, yeah, CCP stream is on right now. What's the historical price on them? I think are they new? Hold on. They are not new. So yeah, they're down a little bit right now. Obviously they would be, but that means that their normal price has been around 50 million. So, I mean, you know, 50 million is for sitting something as your background. Like, it has, so the secret is that the tab has to be the main active tab of that browser window. And usually, like, I try not to have anything full screen on top of it, because then Twitch realizes that it shouldn't load. And as soon as Twitch doesn't load the video anymore, then it stops recording you as watching it. So, like, even if you go and look at your inventory, that time that you're tabbed away might not count. So make sure you go there, give yourself plenty of time, because I often find that it takes 6 or so hours in order to get 4 hours of viewing, just because of things going wrong or whatever. But, you know, CCP is showing off a bunch of other streamers, so there should be plenty of opportunities to watch the stream. So, cool. There is that. How you guys doing today? So tonight is 4th of July, so anybody who wants to come on Discord today and tonight to help distract me from that fact, you're more than welcome to come. So what's going on? Today, well, so the big thing that's happening that we're going to be talking about in a little bit is the Plex. The friction-free Plex is coming on the 7th. Who does Rain fly with? She flies with a bunch of people. She's been streaming for a long time. Like, she's one of the older guard. All right. Let us jump into... She flies with Slice? What? I know she was Horde for a while. Speaking of meetings, this weekend's is the Convocation of Empyrean's Corp meeting. If you are in the Convocation, it's going to be an important one. We have a lot to announce. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on right now. So come check it out. Convocation of Empyreans, not Triglavian. Are we invading Delve? Spoilers. All right. What is the price of Plex right now, I wonder, with this announcement? Oh, also, there is actually a video that I want to... Hold on. There's a couple of videos that I want to prepare before we talk about the Scope News article that I just realized earlier. Eve, Scope. Delve, that was my home. Well, now you've got a new home. I just got my new meds today, or like yesterday was my first day taking my new meds. So I've been getting a lot of shit done and trying to get things ready to go. So hopefully that is seen as like more positive things. It's one of the reasons why like I want to do several segments today, so that way we can edit those out and put them out as their own videos, because that was highly successful last week. Can you have some what? Oh, Plex? What? There's Pulse. Where's Scope? Oh, meds? Well, oh, water. Yeah, don't forget to hydrate. And don't forget your coffee tastes better in a Convocation of Empyrean's mug. Let's see. We are looking for... There was scope videos about... Maybe the Fury... Well, at the very least, I want to show off the pirate... Yeah, Citadel Destruction Nullsec Heist. I'm actually really surprised too, Setham. I wonder what's going on. Coffee of Empyreans. Hell yeah. Oops. All right. So we are... Let's see. Did you watch the dev video about it? We're going to watch the entire... I actually... So I've watched only enough of the dev video to realize that I wanted to make a reaction video for it. So we're going to do... We're going to do the scope video first, and then we're going to do the actual dev video. But I do want to see how Plex is doing. I mean, that looks down. But 6.1 is still, like, 6.1 being down is spooky, right? Like, that's the whole point. Oh, only if you have audio set. I thought my point is that, like, it's a tricksy bastard, and it's full of, like, it gets messed up really easily. So just give yourself extra time and be careful about, you know, making sure that you're getting credit for the time that you're watching. All right, so let us begin. Love the 2 gig patch today. Hold on. Like Eve patch? Yeah, 7 hours ago. New files. Oh yeah. Yep. A whole bunch of new sounds. Interesting. I didn't notice that before. Let's see if there's anything else here. Some new UI stuff. There wasn't any patch notes though, so, right? A lot of music, a lot of sound changes. A lot of sound changes. The bigger ones are all music. Yeah, probably. But like... Huh. And there's a bunch of strings changes that I didn't see earlier. Is this new? This is from 7 hours ago. Project delivery stuff. Amount below and above market average? Does that make it so that, like, if you're turning in a job, it tells you whether or not the job is paying you above or below market average? I like that. Yeah, this really feels like... Wait. Am I sure there's no patch notes today? It feels like there would be something for patch notes. Patch notes. Nope, they don't have any listed patch notes for today. That's weird. So now I got to test that, because I wonder how implemented these strings are. Because it looks like these are helping with corporation, like, delivery jobs, which admittedly has been a giant pain. This is better verbiage. So, like, part of the problem is that if you have a job that needs like 300 pyrite and somebody has 5,000 pyrite and they try to drop it, it'll just, like, it'll reject it all and then say, screw yourself, you need 300 pyrite. So this is a better verbiage for that, but it's weird that they didn't change the verbiage. They have new verbiage, so I don't know. I wonder if something's happening. Also, this kind of shows that it's a potentially a pop-up box now. Is this... Well, let's see. Let's test this live, shall we? We got nothing better to do today, right? Let's see. Because these look like these are all related to project deliverables or like corporation projects, which I'll see whether or not I'm logged in a place where I can. I might not be in a good place for that. Nope, I'm not. Fuck. All right. Well, never mind. Never mind. I can't test that right now. I'll have to test it later and get back to you guys. Let's get back to Jita. They did change. We'll talk about that when we talk about the video. Yeah, I think the test on Sissy went fine, apparently. It's crazy that we're getting the... Well, we might be getting the Plex market before we get the Smoke and Fire, right? I think that it's... Well, it seems like fast turnaround for us because they didn't... Like, they didn't actually showcase that early. They didn't let us know that they were working on it a long time ago, like they have with so many other things. They've kind of been selling us on the future a lot. So the idea that they're putting out something that's basically ready to go is kind of unusual to the way that we process things. But I guess, like, the whole Plex, like, that's a very business side of things. Hopefully we'll talk about that when we get into the actual, like, video. But for now, let's jump into... Oh, God. Yes. All right. Let's start off with the scope video, and then we'll talk about what's going on and some of the news and brief and whatnot. But here we go.
The Imperium has officially completed its strategic withdrawal from the Delve region, concluding a significant chapter marked by the devastating conflict of World War B2. Marking the departure symbolically, the Imperium leadership orchestrated the deliberate destruction in 1DQ1 TAC A of the prominent stage in Keepstar, the Innominate Palace, named after the late Capsuleer and celebrated Goon Swarm Federation member Innominate. Famously resilient during the extensive siege of World War B2, the structure was ceremonially demolished by Capsuleers from across New Eden. Invited to participate under the condition that they piloted Rifters, a ship synonymous with early Goon Swarm Federation operations. More than 1,500 of these frigates were distributed among participants, with over 3,000 Rifters in total making an appearance in 1DQ1 TAC A. Violence threatened to mar the celebrations, as a number of Rifters were attacked en route to the event. But the ceremony proceeded unabated. After the Citadel was destroyed in a memorable blaze, thousands of Rifters warped to Goon Swarm Federation member Applepear in a megathron who lit up 1DQ1 TAC A with fireworks and the ritual dispatch of the Rifters with smart bombs, resulting in a chaotic spectacle of destruction. The remnants of the Keepstar will undoubtedly serve as a landmark for anyone wishing to visit the site of its ultimate destruction at the hands of those who defended it for so long. With the Imperium's final chapter in Delve now closed, the future of the region and neighboring Quirius remains uncertain, with early movements suggesting a fragmented power landscape. The initiative has swiftly moved to claim key systems bordering their home region of Fountain. Additionally, smaller independent entities such as Drake Lair, Lunar Fluorescence, and Zerg Spawner have begun seizing sovereignty throughout Delve. Currently, Delve seems poised to serve as territory for independent groups, seeking regions without complex diplomatic constraints. The scope will continue to monitor developments. This is Alaconda reporting for the scope.
Okay, I wanted to play through the whole thing just once, and then we can go back through and kind of talk about some of the details that I want to talk about. So the first thing to kind of mention when it comes to this video and this news story is kind of how did we get here? They mentioned a few things like World War B2, etc., etc. So Delve actually was a historic homeland for the Goon Swarm. If we open up the map, we can see that Delve is down here. However, during the course of events of EVE, as it kind of evolved, Goon Swarm by 2018 or so, and actually a lot before, like the formation of like the Clusterfuck Coalition and their whole like grappling with technetium moons and making their wealth and power throughout most of 2010 to 2020, they existed in Declan as their kind of their powerhouse and controlled a lot of this section in the north. However, one of their subgroups, a group called SpaceMonkey Alliance, which was, I think, part of the Imperium, but kind of near the periphery of the Imperium, made enemies of one of the, at the time, casino groups. Like there was actually places where you could like gamble your ISK on everything from like poker games to betting on alliance tournaments to like raffles, kind of like the HyperNet is now. Like there were third-party people that were just doing it on their own websites, and so these online casinos existed for you to spend your ISK on. And the thing is that these casinos, it turns out that people like to gamble, and being able to do it was a good way for people to spend their vast amounts of wealth that they were able to get in EVE. They were able to feed their gambling addiction by gambling their space funny money. Summer Blink was a big one, but actually by the time World War B started, Summer Blink had already been removed from the game. But that concept had kind of expanded outward to, shoot, now I can't even remember the name of the actual casino that was like the main one that did it. But either way, they had a fabulous amount of money. And to get a little bit further back, yeah, I Want ISK, I think is what it was. Maybe, I think that was it. That might have been it. Either way, so like years before that, or like, in a previous attempt to kind of unite the forces against Goon Swarm, you have the N3 coalition, and which got disrupted by the by BTEC R5RB. Then we have like the the Honey Badger Coalition. The Honey Badger Coalition was Test's real first attempt to kind of rally together their power base in order to attack the Imperium. And they ultimately got defeated because the Imperium understood the economics of war better than them. And so while they had the largest amount of territory, the Imperium took a bunch of their moons and thus their money at the time. That's how it worked. And so they ended up not being able to fuel their own war effort, right? They didn't have the funds. And that's important because now a casino with literally infinite ISK, like not literal, but, effectively infinite ISK, trillions of ISK a day as an operational cost, gets mad at the Imperium. And so they think, okay, we're going to do this again. And so they rally everybody together again to try to take down the Imperium. And because, it's like the Honey Badger Coalition, but now they've got money, so they make the Money Badger Coalition. And this is what leads to a war that we still to this day kind of argue over the name over, World War B, the War of Solveless Aggression, whatever you want to call it. But basically, I think it was 2018, most of the forces that were not the Imperium rallied together and attacked the Imperium's holdings in Declan and surrounding areas. And very early, relatively early in this war, one of the main groups of the Imperium defected from the Imperium, CO2. And not only did that end up like basically exposing one of their biggest flanks, but also CO2 leadership had access to all of the information of all of the Titans and other things that were being built within the Imperium's holdings. So suddenly the enemies of the Imperium had all of the data, all of the intel that they needed to cause maximum damage. And they proceeded to start doing that. And the Imperium's response was to basically decide that this was an unwinnable war, and so began to proceed to basically do a tactical withdrawal. That's why they called it like the War of Solveless Aggression, because their major complaint was that they had sovereignty, which makes them vulnerable to attack, and the attackers, by and large, didn't have sovereignty, so they didn't have any stakes in the game. So they were going to like maximize the value of this sovereignty-less system and basically not care about any of their structures of space and let Declan fall. And, you know, the forces of the Money Badger Coalition went through that whole area and just burned it all to the ground, and it was all a good time. And in the end, the Imperium decided to retreat to their much more fortifiable early home of Delve. And that is when they occupy 1DQ as their home citadel. And knowing what happened and what is inevitably going to come, the Imperium begins a multi-year project to industrialize the ever-living crap out of Delve and its surrounding areas. This is where the Delve time unit comes from. See, like, Imperium just continually iterate on making it as efficient as possible for everyone to be able to make money, make Titans, make supers, rat, etc. within their realm. At this point, I used to call, 1DQ and the Imperium were the Rome of EVE Online, right? If you want to go out and you want to make your fortune, you go to the city, right? You go to the most established player empire. So then in 2020, that's when we have World War B2, where Test Alliance once again kind of rallies the people, and we get Pandemic Horde and Test and all them kind of attacking into Delve. And that's what the last great war that a lot of people like know of, and that's World War B2. And there's a lot of cool stories that came from that time period, but the biggest thing is that effectively the enemies of the Imperium burned everything outside of this one constellation. 1DQ, this constellation right here. So they had staging in T5Z. This was like, and everywhere else was occupied by enemies of the Imperium. However, there was a few attacks attempted to go in, but each attempt to like actually infiltrate this particular constellation resulted in failure. There's a couple of big attempts that happened. There was a siege that they attempted to do where they tried to basically starve out the Imperium in 1DQ. So basically for the whole summer, they didn't make any major attacks, but they like threatened the whole area. But then they, Vili was setting up for one big final attack, and then at the last minute announced that there was going to be no big last attack, and all the ships that he sold to everybody, well, I guess they're yours now, and all of the leadership had already evacuated their stuff, and get out now, the war's over. And the Imperium immediately begins to knock out all of their jump bridges and butchering a whole bunch of people, and that was the end of World War B2. So, it was an incredible feat that the Imperium did in order to defend 1DQ against like all of the attackers. And, to the point where some people have said that it's impossible, all that sort of stuff. And it's actually true that there are some advantages to 1DQ because of things that were grandfathered in, right? Like every time they tried to make balance changes when things like in syllabexes or the positions of structures, etc., anything that already existed was grandfathered in. So there were actually and also there's some pretty nice structures too in the system. So it was built out in a very uniquely good way. And it has been their home and unpenetrable fortress from that time. Now, whether or not this means that a home system cannot be assailed, I don't know. I don't think so. I think that obviously there were mistakes made by the enemies of the Imperium. I would still love to see like the opposite become true and see more about them attacking a staunch resistance to see it go the other way, but we'll have to see. The point is that, you know, with Equinox has changed what systems are valuable and how and why. And this has led to a series of changes by the Imperium in their locations, as well as like attempting to go after enemies and having their first conflict out go pretty much a lot faster than they expected. So now they're kind of continuing to march forward. But what that means is that they've kind of left 1DQ behind. And at first they were leaving it behind for Brave, but now that they've called Brave kind of further into it, they've made now the decision to finally once and for all, or not once and for all, but like to shutter their operations in 1DQ. And so one of the things that's interesting about 1DQ is that, you know, a few months ago, or like a year ago, a couple years ago now, whatever, there was an interesting, the Desert Storm Horde. So the previous time that something big in 1DQ happened was this.
Details surrounding the heist and sabotage operation in the heart of Imperium's capital system of 1DQ1 TAC A have been emerging, as it becomes evident that trillions have been lost to this audacious act of theft and sabotage. Beyond the theft, the Imperium leadership were shocked to discover that the perpetrator had made use of his administrative rights within the first Imperial Palace Keepstar to disable all support systems for the vast cloning center housed within. Dedicated to storing tens of thousands of Capsuleer jump clones, the facility's stocks suffered immense damage. While many could be salvaged, rumors are circulating that many were irretrievably lost in the process. Imperium leader Ashar Elias identified a long-term Imperium member known by the nickname J. Amazingness as the perpetrator. While unclear on his motives, former comrades singled him out on public communication forums in connection to this highly destructive act. After carrying out the heist, J. Amazingness left the Imperium and joined the Pandemic Legion Alliance. It is unclear if Pandemic Legion were involved in any way with the theft, or if they simply welcomed Jay into their organization along with his newfound wealth. Perhaps to further torment his former friends and partners, Jay has uploaded recordings of the system logs generated during the heist, thereby exposing the full extent of the damage he had inflicted upon the Imperium. His motive still remains unknown. After delivering their ultimatums over citadels anchored close to Jovian stargates, the Angel Cartel and Garistas Pirates have made good on their...
Okay, that was basically it. You know, what was it? A year ago now, November 30th, 2023, so almost over a year and a half ago now, the clone bay in 1DQ was shut off at the beginning of Havoc. And, you know, that's really important because people store their clones in these clone bays, and this destroyed almost all of those clones. Now, it did turn out that, like, only a chunk of them were destroyed, like 5,000 plus or whatever. But, like, the thing is that nicest clones were stored there. Titan pods were lost. Very, very expensive implant sets were lost. But ironically enough, this happening made it a little bit easier for them to do what they did this weekend with the destruction of 1DQ, because one of the biggest considerations with turning off a structure that has been on is the things that people have in it. And of course, it's a video game, so people are not necessarily paying attention to the day-to-day all the time. So, you know, there's probably people that have had a clone in 1DQ for years at the time that this happened. And especially if they're going to get rid of 1DQ, that's a consideration that they would have to be, is like, okay, well, every single person that has a clone in there that isn't really paying attention to the game right now, that clone is just going to get destroyed, and it's our fault. So this having happened a year ago actually kind of makes it so that only clones that have been put in the last year and a half are in consideration. So that actually makes it easier for the leadership to make this decision to do this. As far as whether or not they let it go abandoned, absolutely not. That's why... My understanding is that's why they did it this way with the Viking funeral. was to make sure that everything goes into asset safety for people. There's lots of internal and external communication. You know, they certainly don't want to be the bad guys. They want people to be able to trust them in the future. And so, you know, having it go abandoned, also that risks it being like intercepted or whatever. So yeah, either way, if you had stuff in 1DQ, then it is now in asset safety. And 1DQ, the 1DQ Keepstar is now destroyed. However, like I said, or like we saw, this video came out a day later, which I think that they did a great job, like showcasing kind of what's going on. A couple other details, like the Rifter thing is because like Goonswarm, when they first came into the game, their biggest power in the early days, especially, was in their numbers. That's why they were the Swarm, right? Our Rifters will clog, you know, we'll clog your arties with our Rifters kind of mentality. You might have battleships, we might have Rifters, but with enough Rifters, we'll kill you. And that has always been kind of the Goonswarm, kind of one of the guiding principles of the Goonswarm. Every little bit counts, death by 1,000 needles, that kind of concept. So that's why they showcased it here. The other actual half of this is that Megathron. So the Megathron is the other ship that's very iconic to the Imperium. Yeah, mantra. It's like a mantra. Because so there was a guy named Baltic who basically, no matter what the fleet was, he would come in a Megathron. So, you know, they could make it like, oh, shield doctrine, you have to be able to go this fast or, you know, shoot this far or whatever. And he would make a Megathron that would make it work. And, you know, he just loved the Megathron. And it became kind of a total thing in a meme. But they had a Megathron fleet that was called the Baltic Fleet, which was basically used Megathrons. And the idea was is that it may not be the strongest one in the, you know, fleet in the world, you know, whatever, but it is the dirt simplest. So we can get people in it and we can get them to be effective in it as easily as possible. So the Megathron has always been kind of beloved by the Imperium, in not quite to the same amount as Rifters, but it makes total sense to me why they would use a Megathron to blow up the Rifters. Also, what's cool is that this right here is now a permanent monument in 1DQ. And like, I've seen some things about people being like shitty about this, but I mean, like, this is not a matter of whether or not you like Goonswarm or think that they're awesome or think that they're even good for the game. They are a critical piece to the game, and their production, what they have done in 1DQ, is something that, like, it's an accomplishment that is worth acknowledging on a, like an outside of video game scale. Like when people talk about the value of video games and social communities and the kind of things that we can do and the friendships that we can make and the organizations that we can run in virtual spaces, like 1DQ and what the Imperium created there is one of the highest examples of that. This is why EVE Online is in the Museum of Art, right? So whether or not you like them or hate them or whatever, like the fact that CCP was able to put out this scope video and this landmark within a very short period of time, which actually on the Hobo Leaks, they originally called it Abandoned Goonswarm Keepstar, and then people took exception to that. So they re-updated it to the First Innominate Palace landmark, which I appreciate. Like CCP is not only very on top of it with this, but is also clearly being respectful of their culture and just doing their part as good stewards of the video game. This is CCP operating at their best when it comes to enabling our stories and making our legacies, right? So excellent, excellent. I love it. It might be worth going to check it out, especially now that 1DQ is going to be a little bit safer to go to than before. I think that one of the scariest parts is that, like, while the Imperium was at 1DQ, they were relatively contained. We knew where they were. We knew where they were operating. We knew where their home was. We're going to have to keep an eye on them, and we're going to see a lot more shaking up, I think, as they, because now they officially now need to establish a new fortress. So that'll be cool. All right. News in brief, Camel Tech scientists meet with Aegis Research and Development for Upwell supports Edencom Sentinel MZ. This is more stuff, fallout from the Drifter Crisis event. Imagine being a baselineer that lived in 1DQ and then getting to watch it blow up. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's the cool thing is that, like, you know, we can say that none of the baseliners died in this one because it was a controlled demolition. Story Keeptar 1DQ1 TAC A ceremoniously destroyed by Goonswarm begins relocation. Thucker Chief split over whether to allow Harada Oki attendance in the Republic Liberation Day events. Liberation Day is usually associated with the 4th of July, so it should be starting basically soon, if not now. Capital escalation in Kyra, Khanid, where newly located capsuleers clash over territory disputes. Yes, more capital fighting in Losec, I'm pretty sure. Landfall Shrine asked for private donations following reduced state funding. That might be worth paying attention to, but that's Caldari stuff. The Dixie hosts Federation Day celebrants with pageants, parade, and Federation trivia contest. Yep, Federation Day was this weekend, or last weekend, you know, as well. Stars and Matar, Sebaster rock group under fire after inviting Amar Choir to participate in Drifter Crisis Aid concert. Interesting. Evermore hosts Artist Expedition in Orifei Paragon Station. More about like Skinner and Evermore trying to be like about artists or whatever. So yeah, nothing too. This is a lot of stuff that might come up later as a note, but nothing that's jumping out to me too big in the news and brief. But I guess, what do you guys think? Do you have any stories about your time in 1DQ? Please put them in the comments down below. You know, this, like I said, this is one of those things that, like, even if you don't care about nullsec, even if you don't care about the Imperium, this is a big moment in EVE history. And I'm glad that there's a scope video about it. But with all that said, I've been Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden. And until next time, I'll see you in space. Woo. All right, let's keep going. Next. Like the stream. I forgot to say that. No, we're not going yet. No, we're not going yet. This means we're not done. That's what this means. That was just part 1. That was segment 1. Well, technically 2. All right. Before we go into the main topic of the day, I do also want to show off something. Let's see here. It's about 50 minutes. Great. There was a pretty big patch this week, including a whole bunch of quality of life issues. But there is one thing that came out that was highly controversial, and at first I started to talk out against it, but we got it corrected. Satonia got my head straight, and there has been some improvements for it. So I want to show off a little bit and help people understand the new compare tool. So if we go to Utilities, Compare Tool. Now, you don't need to start it this way. You can compare tool just by going to basically any item whatsoever. You can show info, go to variations, and then hit compare all. That's another way to open the compare tool. And we've got this, right? And there's been a lot of hate for it. First of all, if you actually, hold on, let me put this as no. User interface. I hate transparency. Done. Okay, so this is the compare tool as it is right now. This is what you might have seen online, and it has been pretty controversial because of its layout. First of all, if you are saying that you hate the new compare tool, just try this in order to as a step 1. You can go to this more, the triple dots in the top right corner, and you can switch it to horizontal alignment. And now it works the exact same as the previous version. So hopefully that alone wins over at least a fair chunk of the naysayers. If you did not know that that's possible, that gets you back 90% of the way to the way it was before. And in fact, they did adjust it so now that there's filters. So now it is a lot closer to the way it was before. In fact, it's even a little bit better than it was before, because you can turn off, you can have more than just 5 things or whatever, 6 things or whatever, and you can uncheck them and check them, and you can only show if different, and you can still click on these in order to sort it by type. So the compare tool is actually really good. It is, I would argue, it is just by definition better than it was before now, because it has all of the functionality that it had before when you include this, plus it's removed the limitation of the number of things to have visible. Yeah, sure, it makes a big thing off the top, off the side of the screen, but you can do that. You can also do it with only the 5 that you wanted or whatever. So you can definitely do this. Now, the one thing that is lost in all of this is the ability to reorder the filter, but like that's the one thing that you lost, is the ability to order the columns. However, you get the fact that now the top one is colored green, the bottom one is colored red. You get the option for the vertical alignment. Maybe they shouldn't have made that the default, but now you have that option, and you're able to see much more features, or many more of the items at one time. Now, what could be good is, you know, a scroll bar. A scroll bar would be handy, I would argue, on the bottom. If you're going to have this horizontal layout, that's the one improvement that I would do. But I definitely wanted to show you guys this because there's a lot of... Can you delete multiple items from the list? Okay. Wait, yes. You actually can. If I selected multiple of them and then right-clicked one, it wasn't working. But, hold on. What I did to make it work, just so you know, is, so when I select one and then select the other and then right-click, it didn't work. But if I select one and shift right-click the other, then it lets me remove them both. So that's how to do that right now. So, like I said, this is much better, guys. I just wanted to show this off to you because I know that this is one of those things that kind of slipped through the cracks. Was a big change with this update, and there's been a lot of lack of information about it. So there you go. This is how to use the new compare tool, and there are a lot of extra cool features where you can actually look up all of the different stuff with the filters. You know, just like the fitting tool side of things. So there you go. If you learned something new, if this is what's good for you, make sure to like. If there's any tips or whatever, please make a comment. You know, subscribe to the channel so that way you get all of my videos. Watch these videos live. If you're watching the recorded video, we do live recordings of all this stuff. And if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a live tab where there's a bunch of live stuff. You can go look at all of the videos from the past and everything. But either way, thank you guys for checking this out. Thank you to my sponsors and supporters, including all of the patrons and members. But I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and until next time, I'll see you in space. Still fish. Still fish. That was a shorter segment. All right. How's it going? We got one more thing to do. Yeah, that was, well, I don't know if it's going to be a short, but it's going to be shorter, that's for sure. We'll see what it ends up as. What's funny is my D-scan short did terribly. So even if oh, this is a really good, people don't go to shorts for a blast of information. That's the real problem. Shorts are about entertaining more than being a reference point, I find. any rate, shorts are about distractions from real life. Oh boy. Any rate. Yeah, these videos help more. I like your Plex one too. Yeah. Well, yeah, and there has been an overwhelming amount of positive response to the Plex video, which is what has kind of inspired me to do this way today, because the idea is like, you know, I do a lot of like my daily videos, but I need to get a lot better at like cutting out the segments and putting them up for people to actually see as segments. Okay. Let's get into the main topic of the day. Global Plex market coming on the 7th of July. So we did just come out with a video that was all about the Friction Fleet Free Plex and the dev blog and my thoughts about it and kind of the history of Plex. I encourage you to go watch that first if you haven't already, and then come back and watch this one. Yes, I agree. But the important thing here is that CCP actually put out like a dev interview, and we're going to go through this and see what we have to say about it. Now, I have watched Nth Dimensional, another really good EVE Online content creator, did a reaction video, and I popped my head in there while he was doing it, and I watched it just long enough to realize that, like, I really needed to do my own. They talk about some very interesting stuff in this video. I don't know everything because, like I said, I've only watched like that one little segment out of context. So I'm interested to go through this and share my thoughts with you guys. Let's get into it.
We're here today to discuss a little bit about the recent updates announced in, last week's devblog. I'm CCP Monty, and I'm joined by CCP Ratati and CCP Swift.
I don't actually know this guy. He must be new to the community team or something, CCP Monty. CCP Ratati is, of course, an infamous leader of EVE Online. He is one of the three people that are like the tippy top deciders of EVE, and he often has to play the bad guy when it comes to like the economics of EVE and the ecology of the economics of EVE. People that are upset that, like, you know, every once in a while I see complaints of like, oh, a person can't like mine or get all of the resources that they need to build their own battleship because like different things come from different areas. A lot of that is like CCP's Ratati's brainchild, which, to be fair, like isn't necessarily negative. The whole point of it is to like there's supposed to be causes for stimulation of trade and like an economy and an ecology within EVE, and so trying to foster that has been a big part of his project through scarcity, through various changes that have happened in EVE in the last 5 years. But yeah, he's definitely had to play as the villain or bearer of bad news in like EVE history. And then of course CCP Swift is a community manager within EVE, but he is a good dude. He was Elise Randolph when he was an EVE player. He was one of the leadership of Pandemic Legion. He was really big into AT. He's an incredibly cheerful dude. He loves EVE. He's like a hyper geek about EVE. I will say, like, some people have even said like they think that he's almost like it's for show because of no, CCP. The people don't like Ratati because of scarcity and everything that entailed. But anyway, so CCP Swift is just like, he is this guy. He's just very authentic. He's very friendly, and he loves EVE Online and Starship. So this should be an interesting discussion.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, nice.
You've been in the studio, right? Before the new studio that we're using.
Yeah, I love it. It's amazing. Yeah. It's a cool little space for us to like just hang out and talk about EVE stuff.
I do like the fact that this has much more of like we're making a podcast vibe instead of we're trying to do a live stream vibe. Looks good.
And just kind of nerd out. It's a great excuse to do so.
I had to turn down all the lighting when Swift walks in because the smile just brightens every single room that this guy walks into. CCP Ratati, you're here with us for the first time also, but
We're going to make sure to like the video, as you should do with all videos that you like, including mine.
I mean, everybody that's watching knows you better than me or such. So
you'd be surprised.
You'd be surprised, yeah. Guys, we're here to talk about mainly the recent announcement to the Plex market, the global Plex market.
Yep.
Ratati, you maybe want to start off with just explaining to everybody what that is.
Yeah, there's a long history around the Plex market. So
So I respect what they're doing, but just to make sure that we can get through it all, and we can slow it down if we need to, I'm actually going to speed it up to 1.25 times and see how that goes, just so we can try to get through this in a little bit less time.
CCP, basically, before everyone else, introduced this concept of trading a token for subscription. This is way back, probably, 15 years ago?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Even before World of Warcraft, but World of Warcraft and Blizzard actually kind of jumped on it 2 years later or something like this.
I remember going to the local computer store before that, buying scratch cards.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That basically was the kind of idea around it. It's legalizing that.
Can you imagine not being able to log into your favorite video game because the shipment of scratch cards with codes did not arrive before the weekend?
So one thing that just came up on my social was, do you remember this kind of moment where everyone had these, it was called the radio station, TV Station 2 in Iceland. So we only had the one, and then we had TV Station 2. It was a private company, and they had to do these decoders. So you'd get the decoder, and then you would get in the mail like an 18 kind of like digit thing where you just like, okay, this is your monthly subscription. You have to type it into the decoder, like 81876. But sometimes you get lucky, and somehow your decoder kind of like didn't refresh, so you got like a free month after. That was like the best thing ever.
Wait, are you guys old enough to have bought video games as text and literally programmed them into? I remember a mate of mine telling me about it, that he had to buy like almost like a book and program, basically write up the program.
The Spectrum, Synchro Spectrum was one. So my wife is actually, she won't like this, but she's older than me, so she did that, and I didn't, because it was kind of like pre my time. I had an Amstrad, didn't code anything on it, but everyone who had a Synchro Spectrum.
CSP Okami has definitely come in and gotten a lot of positive vibes about him, and I think that he's earned it. I'm very hopeful about like, he seems to have he brings a really good perspective and balance to the leadership team.
Usually, like, I think they got like a coding book to create some code in that game.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy how like technology, just even in gaming, has progressed in just like a couple short years.
Yeah,
only a few short decades.
Yeah.
And if you think that's crazy, we've already done a segment way out of what we're going to do, and I love it. But yeah, back to the global Plex market and the whole history of it.
So the components are, we have this token you can trade for subscription, and Plex was basically the introduction. The 500 Plex meant you could buy a 1-month subscription. Then Plex became more of a digital currency for loads of services, what we call utility goods in this blog. So in the blog, we tried to define a lot of this history.
So a couple things. First of all, the elevator pitch of what's happening is, while you do have to still pay the fees of the location that you're at in order to put it on the market, Plex is no longer going to have a location when it's on the market. So if somebody puts a Plex on the market in Dodixie, it'll be purchasable in Jita. Like, the actual purchasing, there's no location anymore for Plex starting on the 7th. Wherever you are, you can buy it. Wherever you are, you can sell it, as long as you can like access the market.
That has never been defined. So it's really going in.
One thing I do want to point out, though, is that there was actually a transition period here where, like, it used to be that, so there's one Plex, and one Plex was 1 month of game time. And then when they wanted to make microtransaction type things with like clothing and stuff and later skins, they used a microplex that they called Aurum. You could break Plex into Aurum and then spend Aurum on premium stuff. And then around 2015 or so, they decided that it was very silly for there to be two different currencies. And so they just split Plex into microplex, basically, converted all Aurum and all Plex into Plex. And now basically 500 Plex now is the equivalent of 1 Plex before. And so from that, it kind of grew out as a universal commodity for premium goods for players. So from there you get skill extractors, you get skins, we get Skinner, etc. But like that transition was already started all the way back in like 2011.
Into like, okay, a lot of this happened over time, but we never.
In JSpace, if you have a Fortizar and that Fortizar has a market, you can buy Plex and you can sell Plex on it. That's it. That's the answer.
Put a word to it, a description of it, like definitions of it. So kind of abstracting everything, putting it in perspective, giving the context of like, okay, this is kind of what we're doing. We never really explained everything. So to this blog is a kind of a historical review, but also trying to like set the record straight of like how we want to approach it. So it's defining our monetization strategy. This is something we talked about at FanFest to kind of just have more open, honest communication about the things we're doing. We have had a couple of monetization dev blogs recently, and this is just one more, so that we can debate the actual things we're talking about rather than kind of imagined or perceived, let's say. So this is all about Plex. Plex is a digital currency that is connected to real-world money. It's the only thing really that's connected to real-world money. And
it's a highly traded item as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it is part currency, part asset somehow in the core gameplay of it.
Yeah, and
I'm pretty sure it represents a significant amount of the trading in game, especially commodity like based trading.
even investment too. Like
yeah.
What's up, Malak?
some of the core investments that players make.
It's like there's three things I hold: coffee, gold, and Plex.
Yeah. It's the safest investment for sure. It's like buying gold. And we want to basically level it up a bit, have it become an actual currency, closer to an actual currency. So when we talk about in the blog, more liquidity, fairer pricing, or like more stable pricing, it's basically the idea that more supply and more demand, they approximate the fairest prices quickly. But today we have this issue of supply being regional, and a lot of the trade is actually happening through contracts. We're not going to solve everything at the same time, but the most important thing is to try to increase liquidity, which means...
Well, you can say that there are problems with people using it excessively as a source of investment and also acknowledging that that is a use case. Like, that is the difference between, like, you're designing for human behavior. So it's, yeah, it's the reality of it. And so that becomes like the control or the constraint that you have to design around.
Means to increase the supply. And we don't want everyone that wants to buy Plex or to sell Plex to actually have to travel to Jita or one of the 4 hubs. Yeah. We just want to be like, on demand. I need some Plex, can just get some Plex. It shouldn't be that hard.
I kind of love the fact that in the video game I love and play every day, I can use jump drives, I can use dark gates, but internet banking, no.
No.
I think that this is something that we talked about in the Plex video the other day, which is that I don't know if they're going to touch into this too much, but it's something that I'm really interested in, which is that, like, Jita has these advantages because it is the place that people go to trade. So the fact that you can now do this anywhere is actually a blow against Jita and a boon to any other trade hub, because now it's just one more thing and a pretty big thing that you're not limited to go to Jita in order to deal with it. So it's one less thing that like hinders people from using Amar or Heck or Zarzak or their wormhole as a trading hub.
That's forbidden. So I think the idea here is then in the devlog, we try to kind of abstract things like what's a currency, what's a digital item, what makes sense in our universe to be able to transfer freely versus what are kind of real world commodities that like have intrinsic value and are, let's say, combat, like, I don't know, they have a pay to win aspect to it. You don't want to teleport some things around the universe because they need to have risk involved in moving them, hauling them across the universe. So like these are the real world items, the things that players make. CCP makes Plex. CCP makes a lot of things, and a lot of them actually contribute nothing to balance in that sense. Yeah. So we are trying to do this. We did a couple of attempts of Venn diagrams of physical items, real world items, digital. This is the best we did. It's good enough to explain enough. It's not like a perfect matrix. There's no diagram that just explains everything, but the core concepts are there, and we want to be able to use these definitions to go forward to explain why we're doing certain things, etc.
Yeah, and we talk to the players about it as well. We want to make sure everyone's got like a level playing field, which I think is super important, of just like knowledge of what we refer to things as, what we view things as, and stuff like that. So no one has to make like a weird assumption, like, oh, CCP did this. This is probably what they meant by it, and then just we kind of lose the entire like good bones of the conversation that way.
I think it's also worth noting. I said last time around, I'm a returning player to EVE, so interacting with Plex in the way that Plex has been for the last few years was something that was pretty new to me in many ways, and I was really glad when I heard about this, and I was telling you about this the other day in a small chat, that just the whole process of having Plex in a Plex vault and moving into your inventory, and then it's stressful, and it is not a very new player kind of friendly thing to do. So in my mind, this change to actually just make this more streamlined makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Just to remove that friction when we have something that's connected to real world currency, that is not an item that is maybe as easily scammed or manipulated or something like that as many others.
Well, so okay, here's an interesting way to think about it, because like a good thing to compare this to is skill books, right? Skill books are another thing that is provided by CCP in the form of like NPC buy orders, right? But like there's still a value in the skill books. Buying a skill from the UI has a 30% markup. Why? Because even though the thing comes from CCP, the fact that it gets moved to a more convenient location for another player, that is value provided by the player that's doing the moving. So the idea is that, nullsec groups can go and buy the skill books and bring them to their area, and they can sell for a 10% markup, and it's still 20% cheaper than buying it from the UI. So the people get 20% off the cost of the skill. You get 10% for your effort of actually coming and providing those skill books, right? But what's really happening here is that we are encouraging people through the production of that value to actually do that task, buy up skill books, move it to somewhere that's more convenient, and sell them there, right? And the reason why the game would want you to do that is because the act of moving that stuff is a thing to do, right? You have to load it up into a ship. You have to figure out how to get that ship to one place to another. It's always been a dumb idea to move Plex, but people have still done it in the past. There's always been, every once in a while, a ship will get blown up with a bunch of Plex. And I've talked to people before. It's not, people like to say it's RMT or whatever, but like it used to be that this was pretty consistent. Like it happened because, again, some nullsec groups, there are people that need Plex in their pocket or whatever, and they don't go to JITA. So there's other people that buy Plex in JITA and run it out to their nullsec group to sell it there for a premium, right? But eventually CCP came out with the Plex Vault. The Plex Vault means that there is no risk anymore. There is no actual transportation that's done by that person that's moving the Plex from their market to their nullsec. In fact, because Plex Vault is universal across your account, you could just log in your JITA alt, buy the Plex, log in your main, put the Plex on the market instantly. There is no actual task to be rewarded by doing that market arbitrage, which is why it makes sense to remove the locality of Plex altogether. That Plex does not exist in a physical location. It exists in a abstract digital space, but still can be bought and sold on the market, right? And so I think that the problem that they're trying to solve is Plex has become increasingly used as a commodity between people, but the physical nature of it has caused limitations that do things like affect other trade hubs, affect people's ability to access it or need to rely on JITA, causes people to hoard it a lot better, causes it for prices to fluctuate in ways that are kind of inconsistent. And so, they're treating it like it's a physical, like a locality-based item that doesn't actually have locality, because you can always just move it to the Plex vault and then move it out of the Plex vault. So you can move it safely. Anybody who's moving it as a physical item has made a critical mistake. Even like there's no actual excuse to move it as a physical item. You can always just move it safely in your Plex vault. So it makes sense to remove the locality of it altogether. That's I think pretty much the best argument that I can make for what's happening.
Exactly. There's a lot of that. Like you don't want to play with that item, and I think specifically. So I think that's on that basically on the same path as we're doing, is like, okay, let's try to simplify life for new players also.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of complexity. We don't need to, and fear of, let's say, being scammed generally, because like now Eve has this brand that like it's a place where people scam you. And
that's actually a really good point too. This is something I always say, which is that, you know, new players come into the game knowing exactly two things. One, that they don't know anything, and two, that they will be punished for any mistake that they make. And this causes a lot of people to not only, like, it basically just causes them to shut down. Like they can't necessarily build their knowledge base and understand that like any mistake they do make, even if it's based on their own lack of knowledge, will be severely punished. And so they end up becoming extremely risk averse in their actions and stick to safe paths, and then end up boring themselves
and grief you and gank you, etc. It's
instead
bad
of
enough,
exploring
and you
the
also
boundaries.
don't lose like actual real money by doing it. So I think that's one of those things that we're trying to like ease people into.
I also think like one of the fun things about it is that even though this might sound like in some ways it will change the Plex market from a kind of...
That is correct, Nico. But the point is that to have things that are that people can grow into, right? It's about giving people... Like, I'm not saying that it's bad that this is true. I'm just saying that we need to be aware of that. Like when we think that players are just going to figure things out or whatever, like just know that like all they know is that everybody is terrible here and they don't know shit. And it's an incredibly complex game. And like that's their starting position. The most informed new players think those two things. And it's something that we have to keep in mind.
Buying, selling, hauling kind of perspective. I have a feeling, and this is not I'm not game designer or anything like this. This is just coming from me personally, that potentially we will see more players participate in kind of like an investment kind of strategies when it comes to their Plex, because it is central. It is something I can do everywhere. It's not something I need to have a specific character in a specific place to be able to participate in some form of market stuff. So I think that could be an interesting thing, and probably a little bit slower movements, you know, when it comes.
This is a huge blow to TTT. I know TTT's had a kind of a sort of history and it's not in its grand days before, but like this is probably the biggest blow to TTT ever. Oh, he's touting. Well, the point is that like the act of it being used as an investment is kind of cool. The fact that it becomes a tool of a hoarding is a problem.
Comes to it's forex trading.
Why can't we just convince players to be more resilient to fun? That's part of the whole, like that. Yeah, that is a cultural thing, and that's something that we have to continue to reinforce. And you see that rise up frequently,
rather than you know, something else. So
I think that's like part of the long-term vision, is to start treating all currencies more as a foreign exchange, but with like the regulations we need. We don't want everything to be like perfectly tradable, but there are some things where we might want to kind of ease. Like you could call it like in the 80s and 90s, there was like a lot of deregulation around like moving capital, like getting capital, like actually doing something that has return investment. So investing in rather than just like safekeeping currency. So in loads of cases, you have what's called like almost dead money. That's too little to actually make a difference. So there's a lot of people who have like a few Plex.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one really wants to buy 7 Plex and then 20 Plex. And like, it's just like it's a hassle. So especially if you travel to do so, to sell your 50 Plex or whatever you got from the daily goals or like any kind of seasonal reward or whatever. So I think this will enable people to just like, okay, get rid of this stuff, however or whenever.
Also, it was partly there already. It was just people had to know that they could essentially inject the Plex into their wallet from
exactly.
wherever.
Yes.
So basically seasoned or veteran players would know while,
it's not about making the game easier as a mechanic. It's about making the acquisition of experience and mastery of the game easier, right? Like, that's the difference between making the game easier and making onboarding of the game easier. I've been talking about this for years. Like, what if Eve was a learnable game through play? And they've come a long ways with that.
Exactly.
Functionally, like just as CCP Ratati was saying, like buying Plex, it was super easy to do. You just make an alt in Jita, which is like a little clumsy, but I think EVE players get used to that just for checking prices.
Everybody has an alt in Jita.
Yeah. But when you're talking about selling it, especially if you've got small,
I would say not necessarily reducing the learning curve, but making the learning curve more meaningful, right? Like having pieces of the learning curve be basically gotchas sucks, but having the learning curve actually be learning is good, even if that requires setbacks.
amounts, that's where things like your skills come into account. So you can't necessarily just throw it to your alt to sell 5 or 10 Plex here and there. So you just end up hoarding it a little bit or holding on to it. And then you're just kind of sitting idle in these wallets. Now there's like a little bit more incentive. If you do have these skills, your like trading skills, you can then list this stuff without like without worrying about the penalties, because like market trading, they're all like small percentages. So if you don't have your skills maxed, you don't have your standings maxed, then you're already losing out. So it's just like, I'll hold on to it for a rainy day. And then there's that mentality as well. Like, what if I want to make a skin? What if I want to do buy something in the New Eden store? Like, if I'm not next to a market like Jita, then I'm going to need some sort of stockpile of Plex. Like, that's at least my mentality as a player, is I always keep a few hundred Plex in my wallet in case I want to just like buy something and I know I'm not going to be able to bounce back to Jita. So now that's just going to be, I'll be able to pop on the market, grab the lowest price no matter where I am, it goes in. I won't have to worry about holding on to like 200 or 300 at all times.
And it's going to be way more of a simple thing where it's like everybody should just have their position on Plex. You know, you just have a buy order up on Plex. It's going to make the buy orders far more aggressive on Plex, I would say, because it's like you just completely remove the barrier to having to go to Jita or log in your Jita alt or manage all this stuff. It's like you might as well just have a buy order up at a certain price that you're willing to spend for Plex at all times.
But that's also survivor's bias.
Yeah.
Like everyone has an alt, not the people who quit before they figured stuff out.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that's also like I'm always wary of the, like, that's how we do it in EVE, because like we're missing out of people who just like missed those things. I think I mentioned that also, like contracts are a scary thing. Like in let's say you come from World of Warcraft, there's a play market and you just kind of inherently trust the play market, like it's buy and sell. Contracts, it's kind of like, okay, it's player to player, but it's not like a handshake thing like you do in like Ironforge, where you actually drop the thing in, both press ES, and kind of it's more like, oh, am I gonna buy something from a contract? Like if I'm 3 days old in the game, very unlikely. Like it's very archaic and kind of difficult to get.
It's also just it's a system. It's not really an application or something. It's a system you have to go through to just search and find and everything like that, and regional and such. And even though there's loads of warnings, you know, it's like, oh, this is 85 billion, not 85 million kind of things. It's still there.
I've been scammed on the contract system dozens of times.
That's just because you're so positive when it comes to these things.
There are so many, like, EVE players are just too smart. They figure out these weird interactions that, like, when they were like developing the contract system 20 some years ago, no one was thinking of like how are players going to screw each other using this system.
Nope. But I've quickly learned that we have to think about a lot of these things, and we can't think about all of them. That's absolutely the case. We're talking about this now in regards to Plex, but you know, friction-free trade is a term that I've seen thrown around quite a bit. Maybe more of a philosophy than something else. But why not more items like this, and what could we potentially see moving there in the future? So
I think that's absolutely the idea, is to figure out what makes sense in the EVE economy. Like, we don't want to break anything, but we do want to simplify things. And there's a few listed items. I think there's a currency aspect that we can deep dive into, and there's also this physicality digital item things that we can dig into, specifically cosmetics, I would call out. They're kind of digital or you know, physical items. To me, a cosmetic item, because you're jump cloning, you're doing stuff. It just means that you 3D print your clothes wherever you are. Like it just does not compute. Yeah, CCP Ratati downloads his clothes. So just like, no, I have to jump, like do my home station to pick up my pants. Cool. Just like does not make sense in the future. It just
my body gets printed with my mind just thrown in there. But my pants, I got to go back for my pants.
So this is one of those things that we talked about when we were talking about the dev blog, where there have been different compromises at different times because of CCP's like kind of goals, as this idea that everything must be physical, everything must be destroyable, was like an early truism in EVE, and piece by piece that has been kind of given up. And one of the very first pieces is the fact that if you put on a piece of clothing, you cannot lose that piece of clothing. And every single time that we go down this step, now obviously, like, to purists, we're losing a little bit of something, But at the same time, like once you get past that threshold, the question is, it's like, why really is it a physical item? And this represents very much like a paradigm shift. It used to be that everything on the market still has a physical location, right? When you buy it, it is in a specific station, and it is in that station and has to be moved from that station if you want it to be anywhere else. Everything still has a physical location when it's on the market. And Plex is going to be the first thing that has no locality. So, I mean, it opens the door to a concept. I don't know if I necessarily call it a slippery slope, because I think that there just is design space for this kind of thing. So there are some things that, while they have been traditionally physical items, it may not necessarily be interesting to the overall design of the game for them to actually be that way, right? Like, for instance, clothing. Does clothing being a physical item really do anything to the gameplay of the game besides force people to go to JITA in order to figure out what clothing they want, right? Like, it doesn't really promote secondary markets. It doesn't really, technically speaking, it makes it so the rewards have to be brought to JITA. But like, this idea that clothing that you don't have on could theoretically be lost, it was a rule that was created because of the policies of back in the day. And so, like, if you give up that idea that, yes, so there are going to be things that are not physical, and if they're not physical, then they can't be destroyed. And once you've gone past that threshold, now you can go back to some of these previous decisions that have been made and think about it, right? So clothing, but then also, like, there are a lot of other caveats that have been made in the other direction, where there's a lot of stuff that can be used by that get bought by Plex that end up being able to be used by anywhere, right? Like, if you have a skill injector, you can use that skill injector regardless of where you are. So once again, it's a physical item that has a certain amount of non-locality, right? Because you don't actually have to physically be there to use it. You just have to physically be there to buy and sell it. So skill injectors could be another theoretical item that is on the spectrum of physicality versus digital. And it's just a question of, like, what works and what doesn't work, right?
So
I'm not gonna stand up in this podcast, that's for sure.
In my head, you own a license to print pants, whatever you want. That's what's happening.
Can I borrow your pants printing license?
Well, what's funny is what he's saying here, and they're joking, but, like, one thing to realize is that every time you get potted, you see your body and you don't have pants on. These are, you're being authorized to represent yourself as showing this, right? This is, they don't print out a set of your pants every single time you get cloned. That's just your official Concord image, your Concord registration image.
What needs to happen is you just, like, we do, like, a convert to digital item, kind of, and then you have, like, a clothes vault or whatever, like a wardrobe or whatever. Like, that's, like, the easiest thing to do in the world, like conceptually. Like, technically, we'll figure that out.
I made a blog a long time ago called "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This," which speculated that the entire captain's quarters was a simulation and that we never actually got out of our pod, and it was all made up by Concord in order to try to keep us under control.
But those are like, to me, the easy, obvious wins. I think there are things like the sequencers. They should just be a commodity. There's no reason to have, like, a skin sequencing item that's restricted to JITA. We see that it's kind of limiting the creation of skins in the first place. So the idea was always to have this as a commodity, easy to access, easy to get, but it just isn't panning out this way. So we'll figure that out. I think that's an easy, there's no contention that makes sense, because it's not pay to win. Who cares? And then I think the bigger aspirational goal is, like, isn't skill extraction very weird? Like, to me, skill points are a currency. It's just currency that you trade over time. And we allowed the trade anyway. So why are we doing 400,000 skill points and 800,000 skill points? Very abstract. Why can't I just get 75,000 skill points that I need?
A specific skill.
Yes, or a skill, whatever. Just, like, on demand, not from CCP, still from players, but just, like, make it easier than go buy skill.
I still think that players shouldn't sell skill points, but We've talked about that before.
Inject, just have a slider in something that says like, I need this many skill points. They're all player made. Just let me inject them. It's fine. I think that's the obvious thing. And I like the idea of just like paying with whatever I have. So let's say you have you're in the market.
I mean, Jeff, I think I don't see a reason why I wouldn't. Again, like the way to look at it is, what is the value of moving around skill injectors? Why are we requiring / rewarding physically moving them? What are they lore-wise? Well, I mean, the problem is that already falls apart by the fact that I can use a skill injector that's in Jita right now when I'm in Dixie or whatever, right? So like any physical interaction with the skill injector in lore is not relevant here. Yeah, exactly. Nico, I think that might be kind of what my argument is that like whether or not this is good, like the effect that it's going to have on the economy has already happened. Like these are already digital currencies. We're just like we have these vestiges of how they operate. That leads to some negative behavior, like people having Jita alts that don't necessarily need to have Jita alts. And we could just streamline this whole process and not actually lose anything because we've already crossed that Rubicon. Now, the damage that is done by buying and selling skill injectors is already like processed. It doesn't matter whether or not they have a physicality in that regard.
Kid, you want to buy the a Marauder, and it just says like which currency you want to pay in. Do you want to pay in IS? Do you want to pay in Plex? Do you want to play in skill points? Like they're all interchangeable anyway. They're just like super difficult to figure out the right exchange rate. You can sell the skill injector on the market, then get the money, but buy a Plex. Like it's all there. It's just like removing that bullshit, saying like here, it's easy to do, and it's very dystopian and it's really cool. And I imagine that myself in just buying milk for blood. That's how I think of it. Go to Kronan, our local store, and just like pay whatever, pay with DNA or something.
If you're going to do that, I will bring a camera. It's like
I think
for the community.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense. And
you know, this also goes back to the fact that a few years ago they said that they were going to get rid of attributes and make all skill training passive, and like this really feels like a big piece to that, but they haven't mentioned any progress on that since. So I don't know.
Someone wants to start writing poems and stuff and blood. So
it's funny that you say that, Jeff, because like literally this is the opposite of NFTs. They're trying to make things more fungible.
Let's why not?
Yes.
I do not support the idea though, but I get what you mean. But I really like this theory on like a thought on the skill points. And when you say the way you say it, skill points are a currency, it's a very, very good point. It's probably the most sought after item in New Online.
Yes. Yeah.
It's what I need most.
One of the biggest successes, because like this whole philosophy that you've been talking about, this isn't our first foray into it. Like I think that one of the most successful things is loyalty points.
Yep.
Like being able to trade loyalty points between groups. We've seen just how impactful this is to the ecosystem. It allows corporations to tax their members or even get donations in loyalty points, trade them between one another, turn those into dreads, which turn into like crazy massive dread brawls just like a couple weeks ago. And it's had like a tremendous positive impact in that ecosystem.
So I think
I really wish that CCP would actually dive into that particular topic more, because like they did do the changes to LP. It'd be nice for us to circle back. And I don't remember anything from FanFest about this, where it's like, let's look at what has happened with LP, because that was a very significant paradigm shift with allowing LP to be traded. And it's had good and bad. And I think that it would be good to have like a check-in with that. And I'd love to hear like actual justifications. Well, that's the thing. Like it is part of a rework. So like I would love to see their justification of like what, like he just said, it's been a very successful change in how things happen. I want to dive into that topic more. That'd be cool.
We talked about LP taxes first.
Yeah.
It was very uncool, like 100%. Like, first of all, it's not a tax, like it's not a CCP tax. It's more like we tried to rename it as tithe, and like you pay 10% to the Catholic Church, like in the olden days. This was more like what do you pay to your as a membership fee or something like that. Just like the ISK tax isn't a tax, it's a tithe.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely, like you said, it revolutionized how that audience or that player group was able to take that dead money. It's the same thing with the 5-7 plexes. You had loads of like little LP that you've been like hoarding or getting through missions over time. You just couldn't get rid of it. You couldn't use it for anything. And now you're able to.
I think data cores are just too important economically.
Because of like trading, which is you're able to turn that into investment. It's just turning wealth. That's capitalism. Turning your stuff into something that pays you back. More fun, more or less, not necessarily more money in the future, but like being able to use it is the key thing.
The thing that I think was the biggest thing about the LP tax and all that sort of stuff and the LP changes is it comes back to a concept that I believe in very strongly, which is that collective problems demand collective solutions, right? Like everybody in a faction warfare group, every single person needs to figure out how to spend their LP. And so that means that what to spend my LP on is actually a collective problem. So if we could somehow pool our LP, and so that way we could collectively figure out how to get value out of that LP, then we could have that be how everybody just gets value out of it, right? They don't want LP, they want ISK for their LP. So how do we give the member ISK and turn the consumption of LP into a collective problem that we can solve as a corporation?
So LP is a hugely interesting thing. I'm not sure that I want to have the same kind of complete freedom in trading it, because then I feel we've lost like something unique out of the game.
Yeah,
like,
you lose
otherwise
the
it's just like
nuance
ISK.
between the
Like
two,
that. So there has to be some kind of nuance, but like making it easier to do, and we owe some quality.
Socialism more than communism, but you know,
Of life things for sure in the LP ecosystem. But we have plans around LP.
Actually, we already can do it. We were doing it in our corp, and we can do it again when we were more active in faction warfare. It might be interesting to do, where basically we put a tax on our LP, but then we also have a corp project that pays you to earn LP. So you earn the LP, we pay you out a certain amount for that, and then we basically take. So we say, okay, we're going to pay you 1,000 ISK per LP. We take 20% cut, but then make the percentages such that you basically get paid 1,000 ISK per LP for every LP that we take. And so now you just get ISK and we collect LP, and then we can figure out how to spend that LP as a collective. That's already very easy to do in the game right now.
Probably like more next year, but they're more about like figuring stuff out around this LP tech debt that we have, transactional ledgers, for example. But also just the LP stores. They are one of our oldest content. They hardly get price changes. They hardly get new inventories. There's nothing. It's just been the same for.
The thing I've always wanted to have added to the LP stores is the introduction of standings influencing things that you can get in the LP store. I want to be able to get different things by having higher standings, so that way, not the same LP isn't worth the same amount for two different for different people, right? If I get 8.0 with Sorum or with Kartham, I should be able to start selling Sorum skins because I can buy them off the market or off the LP store. And now my Kartham LP is worth more because I've got a thing that I can buy that most people that get Kartham LP can't buy because they haven't ground all the way up to 8.0. So now there's niches within the LP markets to make it so that, loyalty with that corporation actually increases in value.
Like 2 decades almost, or whenever.
Are there already opportunities? Yes, you can. So you can pay people out for earning LP, and you can tax that LP. So yes, the effect of that is, like I said, we take 20% of your LP and we pay you 1,000 ISK per LP. Like we did that for the first couple of months when we were in Angel Cartel successfully.
It was
There's very much a fixed gameplay loop.
It's
for
just
those that
fixed.
are getting a lot of LP,
Yes.
they go and purchase the same items, they bring them to the same place, sell in the same way. So there's not a lot of variety.
And there could be like ways to influence like a limited supply, something to create some kind of interesting gameplay. And when do you invest in LP items? When do you think it's going out of stock? Like stagnant gameplay or predictable is like the worst. So I think we could move a lot of interested capitalists into that space.
And honestly, the LPs, like what they're describing on the LP store, like the manifestation of this is that the spending of LP is the most boring, complicated, difficult, and biggest barrier to entry to being truly successful in faction warfare, right? Like I said, this is everybody's problem. Everybody who's in faction warfare for any amount of time has way too much LP and doesn't know how to spend it. Everybody needs to know how to get the best out of their LPs. The high sec buyback programs and stuff like that exists. But like ultimately, like it is not an interesting puzzle to solve, and it's a constantly like finicky problem to solve because everybody's got. It's such a big it's a competitive space that hasn't changed in any significant way in years.
If we start having more dynamic offers, products, etc. in the LP stores. And I also think it kind of sucks from an LP perspective that there's not also just like a really cool things that you buy for yourself in LP stores. It always gets reduced to this kind of ISK per hour calculation. There's no aspect of loyalty where you buy a soulbound thing or something where you actually like, I earned this, I have level 10 rank.
One of the interesting things that I want to point out about LP Store, a very insightful thing when we were talking about LP back in like 2019, before, like back when the idea of being able to trade LP was kind of poo-pooed by Hilmar, like the thing that he was talked about it was the loyalty points store. The reason why it's called loyalty points is it's supposed to be like frequent flyer miles, right? It's supposed to be a kind of a trick that the corporations, like a special incentive that the corporations are offering you in order to get you to work more for them, right? As you build up with them, then you get to unlock like cool perks that you get because you're continually working for them. And I actually really like that idea, and I think that should be preserved in all of this, and I think that feeds a lot into what he's talking about right now, where it'd be cool if the loyalty point store had things that, like, more things that you got not because you just want to sell faction ammo, but it's like, oh, I need to make sure that I have the cool jacket, although there are some jackets and stuff, but like I think that EVE Online need titles and stuff like that too, but either way.
Rank standings, I have a rank.
Well, Jeff, it is kind of strange to see Cal Mill flying Executive Navy issues, but what's fun about that is that, like, you know that basically the use of Executive Navy issues is funding your enemies. Like, people can use whatever ships they want. A good example of this is, like, in all of our market stuff, we try to make sure to purge. We every once in a while we catch Navy, like Caldari Navy hybrid ammo in our fits, and it's like we need to purge that from our fits because that supports Caldari militia instead of Galente militia. So we try to promote Federation Navy hybrid ammo instead of Caldari Navy hybrid ammo, even though because mechanically they're the same. It's just about who gets paid for it, and I really kind of like that. It is I mean, like, is it immersion breaking? No, but like you're seeing different pressures, and if you're like if there was a pressure to economically starve out your enemy, then you actually would see Caldari steer away from using things like Executor Navy issues. Instead, what you see is them being very spiteful of the fact that they're forced to use Executor Navy issues.
Rank. Why don't I get like special stuff? Why is it all the same?
Yeah, where's my golden Megatron because I have
yeah.
with Galente Navy or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Something. It could be cosmetic. It doesn't have to be paid to win or anything else. But just like, how do I show that I'm a loyalist? I've been in the NPC militia, faction militia for like a decade, but I really have nothing to show for it when I'm flying with other pilots.
Yeah.
So I think there's like a lot of interesting stuff there.
But on that topic, with a global flex market, the other global market we have is obviously the Paragon Hub. I was listening to you.
Here's a question. If you could buy a medal that is displayable on your character for LP, I wonder how many people would buy it just to say that they've done it. Like if it was like 1 million LP for like some commendation that basically just shows that you spent 1 million LP for that commendation. I bet you people would want that.
Chatting with Oz the other day on quite a few
LP for faction standings would be a cool idea too.
There were questions in there just on the global kind of trade and market and uniqueness of items. Like, you know, instead of golden Megatron, the only
a skin rather than a medal. I mean, what if it was a pack?
Megatron I would love more is the one built by Swift.
Yes.
If I'd have a made by CCP Swift, I'd treasure it. It'd be a Hanger Queen probably though.
I think that's a dream that has been like becoming more realistic over time. So like there is a conversation in the dev blog about like, or an explanation of what singletons are. Singletons are basically unique items where which are like actually unique.
So what he's talking about here is actually NFTs, not like NFTs as in like monkeys, but like the idea of non-fungible tokens, right? Singletons.
Stored uniquely in the database with you call it EU UID, unique.
Like
I would only trade it for things that are useful somehow. Well, I mean, like there are different players with different things. Like, you know, That's a very utilitarian mindset, and that makes sense. For somebody who's more of an achiever, the fact that there's something just cool, there's an achievement to get by just dumping a bunch of LP, that might be worth more to some people than ISK, right?
Missiles and
yes, like a mutated item, and that does have like made by. So like you have your signature there, but like 10 years ago, there was this like we were in different, or 20 years ago, we were in different space from a time and place around databases.
Yeah.
So it was all about like conserving storage, etc. Like now we have like AWS. Everyone has thousands of gigabytes of pictures on.
Yeah, people pretend that there are a lot of people that think that skins are not useful, but there are people that have come to me that have wanted me to make the skin for them just so that they can say, like, the thing says that Ashtarothi made the skin or Punch made the skin or, whatever. You could make it yourself, but then it wouldn't say that it was made by that person. And that is a real thing. Like, it's not a big thing right now, obviously, but like that maker's mark concept is something that people do desire, and they seek them out in the ways that they can have them, like with Abyssal mods and with skins
on Amazon Cloud or whatever. So it's a completely different game, game for that. So we're not limited.
And we're not talking about designing the entire reward structure around cosmetics. We're talking about having that be an aspect of it. We're not saying take away from the utilitarian function of LP, but it doesn't take away from the ability to buy ammo with LP to also add the ability to buy a medal with LP. That's just an addition.
Buy these things anymore. And we also had a namespace kind of like, or like a digit. Like we couldn't have like infinite numbers.
Yeah.
We have now infinite numbers of unique IDs. We'd have to basically not run out of numbers 10 years ago. Now we can basically have infinite numbers, and this is just how databases have evolved.
And then you're talking about the unique IDs of
of items, just storing all of them.
You could create, because it's been, you forever and been around for a while. We could start playing around with similar stuff to what happens Middle Age Plus, I guess. Anyway, when you start.
If you're reworking LP, utility should be the #1 consideration. Well, I guess my point is that like this is this isn't necessarily suggesting a rework. This is about kind of like how can we work within the current system, right? I think that, like I said, as far as a rework goes, I would say that the biggest change that I'd recommend is adding standings as a mechanic to the LP store. Like that would be the rework of it. As far as like getting the most value out of the LP store as it is right now would mean like we could experiment with putting in things that are, effectively achievement based or achievement tokens, not just ISK.
Looking for your first car and you kind of, I found that exact car, and it's like something that makes no sense to buy because it was a shitbox back then, but I'm still going to restore it for like 10 times the value of a new car.
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
Peak. If I could find a 4X from 2004, I'd love it.
Yeah. Even the original look, that would be even cooler.
Oh yeah,
sure.
with the dent.
Yeah. So this is basically like if everything were unique ID, we'd also blow up the inventory, because that's a lot of unique things. There's like trillions of items in the EVE database. If you couldn't package them all to be like, okay, but these are commodities. These are all the iron scraps. These are all the ships. It's also like you need some conservation, but the idea is to have just a distinction of custom things. Like a custom thing is a multi-plasmid item. A custom thing is a player-made skin or an artisan skin. And we can evolve that, but it needs to be like an action to convert something like on purpose into a we can't
becomes a handcrafted
yes.
kind of.
Yeah.
So let me tackle this for just a second. Basically, there's only so many items in the database. Every item in the game, everything in the game has a type ID, right? Like we can go here and pull up a random Hobelix page with something in it. We can see, look, everything has a type ID, right? So every new item, new thing, new creature, new set of stats or numbers that CCP wants to put in has to be an entity, and it has an item, and it has to have an ID. And so there's only so many basic types of things that they can have. So they can't have every single module that's created be its own unique thing, because then it would just continually be, an unlimited amount of type IDs of the things. But individual instances of a thing can be a modification from the template. So the best example of this is mutaplasmids, right? So you would have a 10MN afterburner, which has a type ID. You could look it up. But I mean, int max is true, but also like it'll become rough to look things up in that database long before you hit absolute. And it's not integer maximum, because you could also just do GUIDs are often alphanumeric. So it's more than just int max, because it's more than just int. It doesn't have to be, I guess. It looks like their type IDs are int, but either way, the point is that hold on. If you have like a 10MN afterburner and then you mutaplasma it, like the effect of the mutaplasmid is just a set of modifiers. And one of the things that are in that aspect is what its base type ID was. So wasn't he complaining about BPCs? Those should be instances too. Yes, actually, BPCs are actually the same thing, right? Like that's why anytime that there is a BPC, there has to be a BPO added to the game, because all a BPC is a copy of a specific BPO, and it like targets it in its record. So in the same way, like your Abyssal Afterburner points to the basic 10MN Afterburner and then applies modifiers to it. And so this is how they make dynamicism within the database. They don't just make it so that every single individual thing is its own individual item. It's that everything is a modification from the baseline. This is true about the Abyss. This is true about how they work out systems now. Like modifiers can be applied to different systems to create different effects. Modifiers can be applied to a lot of different things. And that's kind of like, and with the skins, like even Skinner, there's just a DNA that is the formula that when applied to the model of that ship successfully recreates that skin every single time, right? So that's how they're able to, so they have like the base database, which is like this is what things are. And then they have a table of specific instances of those models, like these prototypes, these archetypes. Yeah, so like the types are the archetype, and then an instantiated, like an unpackaged module or an abyssally rolled module or whatever is an instance of that archetype, which is why there's a difference between stacked items and unstacked items, packaged items, unpackaged items, because an unpackaged item is its own singleton with its own story. Once you package it again, it becomes fungible. It becomes just an archetype.
Mastercrafted, handcrafted, or something. Yes.
Does it get a bonus?
Which is a big problem with the whole like crafted by blah, right? Because things that are crafted by somebody are often managed a lot of its time in archetype form, right? Where it's just, oh, it's a stack of 15 afterburners. If suddenly we have to keep track of the fact that 5 of those 15 were made by this person and 5 of them, or 10 of them were made by this person, that actually makes them 2 different afterburners at this point. So that information can't exist while they are packaged. So these artisanal details really only exist in things that do not become repackaged. So things like BPCs and things like abyssal mods, skins, etc.
I'd be wary of that, but I don't know. Like it could be.
This isn't even ancient Eve code things. This is just code things. This is just how data sets are built. Now, granted, a lot of it has to do with decisions that were made back in the day or whatever, but like this is still pretty much the way that you would have to build it now if you built it from scratch. It's just you would prioritize different things. Like they've learned to add these modifiers over time, and some of our systems don't actually handle that really well. Like, for instance, kill mails were never designed to transmit the modifications of an Abyssal role. It's not built into the kill mail reporting system. So when you see an Abyssal mod, it just knows it's an Abyssal mod. It just goes back to the prototype, which an Abyssal Afterburner prototype doesn't have any of the details, so it can't give you anything, right? But if somebody links you that specific mod in the game, you can then put that into your fitting and all that sort of stuff, because the transmission in game does send the modification data as well as the prototype.
I'd pay a premium for a 0.something% increase.
But that's just a
something
mutated
because,
item, right?
Yeah, but it's handcrafted by somebody who is.
Yeah, you could have like a.
I mean, half of it is locked behind code that is so old and fragile. I wouldn't even necessarily say that. I think that Eve is an incredibly complex system, and like it isn't the fact that it's so old, it's so big. Like as it gets bigger, and like the fact that it is old does matter because different decisions were made at different times, and obviously some of the code is probably less understood, especially by the people nowadays. But a big part of this is just incredibly complex systems, and we're inventing ways to manage these kinds of things. I can't stress enough how like MMOs are less than 20 years old. As far as like human history goes, that is fucking nothing. They are solving problems that have never been solved before on scales that have never been tackled before. So we got to keep that in mind. Like it seems pretty obvious to us, but like this is the bleeding edge of technology. They're not just having to build code, they're also having to build these systems. And those systems do have to cooperate with the previous systems. And there are limitations to that, and there are constraints to that, and that causes them to want to tend towards solutions that they can implement given the framework rather than changing the framework. But I mean, the bottom line is that like this is an incredibly hard project. Yeah, they often, well, that's also part of the reason why they've spent a lot of time in the last 6 or 7 years explicitly bringing in people to help them integrate this stuff, and why, like, it seems like they've gotten a lot more aggressive when it comes to not allowing technical debt to hold them back. It is really hard to build a train as it's moving. And I think that Frontiers is actually a big piece of this too, because it's allowing them to kind of experiment on a less accreted, I don't know, less accretion, less buildup, less fluff, or like the detritus of time and decisions made over time in order to experiment with the actual like social mechanics, mechanical, like economic mechanics, etc.
Maybe the way there would you need to have crafted 500 of this item, or depending on the size of it. Like, it was super interesting kind of way forward.
So you're basically like at the center of this is that how do you treat these handcrafted items or mastercrafted items, because you can't stack them today. Is
there much talk about AI's impact on Eve? Well, so part of that is like sort of taboo, because like a lot of people are going to hear botting as soon as you talk about that. Although there is a couple of organizations that I've seen that have kind of promoted themselves as being led by ChatGPT. I've used ChatGPT a little bit to get information about Eve, but unfortunately, like ChatGPT is not really the correct tool for that a lot. You can get problems with that. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but certainly I don't think that they talk about it in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So like we still haven't found a way to stack these.
You don't stack handcrafted stuff anyway.
Yeah, but like what if it's like ammo? You can't create a stack of mutated ammo, for example. So like that like is also stopping the adoption, because you can't have a predictable supply or inventory of like this mastercrafted thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes like more of a specialist, super kind of like hard PvE, top tier abyssals, whatever. So it becomes only the playground of the masters in some way. But I think there's a way to kind of bring it down to the like more a common usage to have more fun with this. So that's something that we can entertain for sure. But other singletons are like,
arguably the first iteration of like the first inklings of this very notion is rigging, right? Because rigging is supposed to be like it is the thing that kind of like the reward of it having it be a singleton as it's the first piece of artisanal. It's the modification that you have made to the ship. It's the way in which your ship is not just fungible with every other kind of ship. And so I think that like when we think about things like ship mutaplasmids, I think that rigs are already trying to fill that solution, and so like they should theoretically work together. I don't know. I like the idea of, like, I get what he's saying here. Like, adding artisanal pieces to Eve is important, but it's also important to be smart about it, because there are certain things in Eve that just for functionality purposes need to be fungible, like bullets.
Or like packet ships, and these the artisan skins. So we're basically just we're adding a new type, trying to figure out how they are.
It's layering. It's just a layer
Yes,
upon a
it's
layer.
just
It's a layer.
Yes, all unpackaged ships and modules are singletons, but they are singletons that could be made back into fungible. So they are fungible with a cost if it's rigs, right? They just aren't currently in a fungible state.
They're just like it's been done here for 2 decades.
And some things actually don't even have to be an item. I mentioned it, like ship fittings, for example. There's nothing stopping us from just like trading, sharing ship fittings in a more like natural.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit, Cavalier, about like AI being able to be useful for assisting in things like converting the code to Python 3, but definitely not the discussion for today. But it is interesting. Like, AI is a big topic.
Way than just having like a tiny little box in the fitting window. Like, there's no way to like in the context of a ship browse the like cool fittings, just like the skins or whatever. Like, so that like there's a case to be made that a lot of our gameplay is just hidden, just so deep, so hard to find. And then even we abstract into, well, we're not even going to do that in client. We'll just do PyFile or something. So like I want to like level the playing ground for like more people just interacting with contracts and stuff like this, so they actually get into the like real gameplay of Eve.
You bring up a really good point. Like, players are really good at kind of showing us through the amazing tools that they make, kind of the appetite that they have for certain things.
Yep.
Like players have made like an abyssal mutaplasmid marketplace. That's kind of like, it's a bit clunky because it's linked through contracts, and you have to kind of know that it's in there to be able to look for it. Like, I don't think a newer player, and there's nowhere in the NPE that shows like, oh, if you want to mutate these items and you get really lucky, you can trade it over here. And that's where you find the marketplace. So like, you know, ship fittings.
That's cool gameplay.
Yeah,
That's
there
really
are guides
cool.
for that out there, and just like a whole bunch of different things. There was LP trading that was very clunky and ghetto, where players would like be in just a chat channel and be like, hey, I've got a million Concord LP. I want like 3 Megathron, not Fed, that would be amazing. Navy Megathron BPCs. I'll trade you a little bit of whatever this is in there. So it was like, it was clunky, but there was an appetite for it because people really wanted to be able to do that.
It's I always remember back when I started playing like year 1 of Eve. You would have the kill mills with fits, but like I had no clue what I was doing. Like I would just ask and ask, you know, hey, how to do this or what? And I was always hoping for almost like a black box kind of thing, where I could recover the secrets of the ship that and I could trade that potentially. Like, oh, I have Ratati's black box from the Dominics I ganked. You know, is that a fit that people want to pay something to know what is on there? I always found that really intriguing, but at the same time, I'd hate for new players, for example, coming in and just being so far behind because they wouldn't know what to fit. But I'm pretty sure the two of you are going to agree with this. One of the most things I do in Eve is when I get into a fight with something that's super unexpected. Like, just last week, we ended up fighting a retri, just a normal retribution. Armor plated and artillery fit. And it was really strong, and it made no sense, and we had no idea how to counter it during the fight because we didn't understand what we were fighting, and it was amazing. You know, thankfully we got it, so we saw the kill match, but you know, it was really cool.
I think it's the idea of like the freedom to be, like not in the meta, but like there's a way to be just like whatever you want to fit and see if you can make it work. I love the idea of just like, nope, I'm going to go against the meta. I just want to be like this particular thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't make just only shield regen or whatever. Like it's never competitive, but like it's your fantasy. It's the gameplay that you imagined would be cool. I think that's like amazing. Yeah. I think there would be way more appetite for like this kind of gameplay for a new player if they, like you said, like had access to, okay, there's a mutaplasmid mark. Like I didn't know what a mutaplasmid was. I don't know that these are cool items. I don't know that these are like rare items. So maybe even if it happens to you, like it's cool gameplay. If you mutate an item and like you get a really good crit on the roll, you're like, okay, how do I price it? Like I'm just gonna be scammed. Like there's no, like it's just like,
yeah, it's super intimidating. It's the one that was like, I was trying to get into this marketplace, and I've got 20 years of Eve experience. I know what makes a module good, but trying to price like a really good rolled micro warp drive, like I had no idea what I was doing.
That's
like,
literally a skill for people.
Yeah.
Just
well, what's interesting here is they haven't talked about it yet. Maybe they will, but one of the big limiters of the contract system is there's no contract history. So when you're looking up a mutaplasmid, like a rolled item, like a abyssal mod, you can see what people are trying to sell it for, but you can't actually see what has successfully been sold, right? And so the true value of things don't really emerge and isn't very visible. And this is also true, ironically enough, about the Paragon Hub, right? Like you can put things up, but even the person who sells the stuff doesn't have a history. Like Punch has been complaining almost daily about the fact that he can't like go back through and see what has worked and what hasn't. He has to kind of remember or infer or maintain a spreadsheet or something like that, because there is no history to contracts and Paragon Hub purchases, which is absolutely insane. And so like a lot of these problems that they're talking about are actually directly stem from that fact alone.
Watching an Abyssal and saying, oh yeah, that's 100 mil or a bill.
Yeah,
it's like they reach like the max tabs and the especially the low slots can reach like 10, 20 billion. You know,
Being like an art appraiser.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Exactly.
There's no like you can't just Google it. It's whatever it is.
There is data to go from, and I'm sure that if you create if you get a big enough data set, there is something that could be done there. But the arts, it's just so much more romantic.
There's some finesse in it. Yeah.
Master crafters and all that.
Yeah.
I like that. Let's jump back onto where we kicked up with the Plex market. I want to ask a couple.
Do I think that contracts should be a separate tab in the market? I mean, that'd be really good for visibility, to put it like to unify the UI a little bit. But I think that that would be a piece to the puzzle that I don't think that by itself solves anything.
A couple of essentially just practical questions. When it comes to market orders, contracts, stuff like that, that's already up. What happens when this gets introduced?
So the existing market orders that exist, so contracts aren't going to change, as Sysibrutati was saying, but existing market orders that are up, they'll all get canceled on the day of the patch when this gets...
They're talking about Plex. This is all Plex orders. So anybody who's buying and selling Plex on the market, this is what's going to happen.
It's introduced.
So the existing market orders that exist, so contracts aren't going to change, as Sysibrutati was saying, but existing market orders that are up, they'll all get canceled on the day of the patch when this gets implemented, and we'll let you know like what date and time that is. It's just, we'll let you know what date that is ahead of time so you can prepare.
It might be.
It is going to be on the 7th of July.
At downtime.
It'll definitely be at downtime. That's why I was like, it'll be at 11. I can tell you that. But all your broker's fees will be reimbursed, so you won't be kind of like out any money. And then when the new global Plex market is there, you'll have to just relist the stuff.
So essentially.
Yeah, it would seem that contracts that involve Plex are not going to be canceled, correct? How long ago was it that they announced it as an idea? The 27th. So 7 days ago. So what? 10 days between, 10 days from announcement to implementation.
Essentially, the strategy is if you've got loads of it already, just don't think about it. Market orders, that is.
Yeah.
Don't think about it. You will get refunded because the company stopped dealing with you tried to trade with.
Yeah.
And I think that this is important. Like this is true because A, it's very much on like a higher level than a lot of us, but also like B, this isn't something that CCP needs to like allot us a lot of time to prepare for because it's making things less restrictive. So, they could just make the change tomorrow and it wouldn't like nobody would have to like realign themselves to operate in this new paradigm, which is one of the reasons why they often give us a lot more warning about a change that's coming. Like, for instance, the standings changes that's happening to faction warfare and pirate faction warfare that's coming in like a month or two. They announce that now so that way people have time to like make their preparations for it. But there's nothing for us to prepare for when it comes to this, so there's no reason for them to have to give us a whole bunch of leeway before they implement it. It wouldn't do any good. Like, it doesn't matter. We're just waiting for it to happen. And the longer we're waiting for it to happen, the more confusing it's going to be. Yeah, Equinox gave Null an entire expansion before it was on, pretty much on.
Yeah.
And you will need to relist on the day, and it will show up in the Plex.
Yeah, it'll just be like
vault or in the Inventory Station. Do you know?
just when you go. So it'll go directly back to your Plex vault.
Okay.
So you're not gonna have to worry about items that are stuck anywhere. And then when you just go to access it again, it'll just be on the market as normal. Like you just type in Plex on the market, you'll click there, and the only difference that you'll see is that you'll be able to see like through all the regions.
So basically, we saw it the other day on the test server, but it'll look like this. Check it out. So if we type in Plex right now, we see this. Do you see how it says quantity, jumps, quantity, price, location, expires in? So just imagine the jump and location columns gone. Like it just shows quantity, price, expires in. And that's it. When you search for Plex, when you search for anything else, it shows all of the columns. When you search for Plex, the jumps column and the locations column is just gone now.
And so when you buy, you can just sort by price, quantity, the whole shebang. So functionally, nothing really changes apart from you just having to relist. And that's only from like a technical reason. There's CCP Master Plan was trying to explain to me why, but like my eyes started to gloss over and I wasn't really sure, but I trust CCP Master Plan.
If you get that name.
Yeah.
A lot of like
not
server
trusted.
proxies and things that needed to like it wasn't as so it started with what if you just remove regions from the thing, you just like don't show me like if market orders equals X, just remove that part, like what happens. It's more or less that. So like the regional market is simply that, but obviously behind the scenes there's like Soul nodes and server proxies and things that like we're like, okay, I guess it's not that easy. But this is a toe in the water.
Yeah.
Like it's not like a proper Forex exchange, but it's like a really good experimentation of like how do people treat it? Like does supply go up? Does demand go up? Does the price fluctuate? Do we get this dead Plex on the market?
Do we get more people interacting with it?
Exactly. So it's just really good. I think it's a great forward step.
So I want to close this off with a question to both of you. If we think about the concept of friction-free trade, and now I'm going to ask you to take off the hat of we are announcing something, and we're just going to hypothesize from a personal perspective. What would be kind of the dream thing that would happen globally, frictionless, kind of on the market in the future? And let's remove technical boundaries like we were talking about, like the master kind of crafters and stuff. What would kind of be the dream item just for you guys there?
For trade?
Yeah. Or dream change, essentially.
I think I'd like to figure out how blueprints work. Like blueprints are
obviously not a digital item. Like these are hand drawn.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you go and copy a blueprint, there's just an army of really good sketchers just sketching up from the first one.
They roll out these paper and just like no. I think blueprints have like a lot of these conversations actually started around blueprints because I was approached 4 or 5 years ago by a DevOps database engineering who told me like, you know what is the biggest load on the server? It's calculating the state and ownership of every blueprint in the game, because
does that include copies?
Yeah, because every researched or like changed blueprint has become a singleton. So they're all stored as singletons. So they're the biggest load on the database.
Even though there's probably a million Mjolnir rocket small copies that are max researched.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're all on like crushing the server every morning. The biggest kind of like database job that they run. And from any survival game, like if you treat EVA as kind of like, okay, how do blueprints work in normal other games? You just get like a blueprint book. You find the blueprint. You have like it goes into your book, so you can like I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna make this. Obviously, EVA is harder, but we are storing blueprint copies in containers, and it's all very archaic. It shouldn't be this hard. There's a lot of new players who never get the satisfaction of just like I'm gonna make some ammo. I'm gonna craft something. I have fun doing stuff. So I think this would
and the copies will be on contracts. They will not be on the market.
Yes.
So it should be the other way around, essentially, where the veterans they would be buying expensive blueprint originals to trade with, or use as commodities or as a passive income.
Yes,
they can find it in the normal place.
Exactly. Yeah. So this becomes something that we can solve like really well. The only thing that we need to solve from a design perspective is like it is cool to lose blueprints. It's cool to have to move them and sometimes die and lose
especially
them.
And that's something we keep on coming back to when it comes to like, as we've been talking all day about what should or shouldn't be a digital commodity. The thing that I go to as my metric is what is the value of it being a physical item, right? And the idea that blueprints have to be protected and where they get put and all that sort of stuff and how they can get stolen, You know, once upon a time, we had our blueprint collection stolen. Like, this is a huge piece of the game. So I would absolutely be against like the value of BPOs and BPCs as being physical items that have to be moved around, and that have to be worked on, that have to be copied, that have to be all this stuff. Like, that's good, but there are definitely problems that come out of like massive amounts of copying, and it also is just so, it's weird. I feel like there might be some space in between where you do have your blueprint collection and it's easier to manage, but at the same time you do have to worry about keeping it safe and keeping its resources available to yourself and to the corporation, because that's the big thing, right? It's about, you know, this is very operational security, not secrecy, but like making sure that your supply lines have integrity, right? Making sure your blueprints are safe and available is a consideration, and the physical nature of blueprints are what kind of enable that in the game. So I think it'd be nice to tackle blueprints while still preserving that aspect of the challenge, if that makes sense.
With limited availability of industrial sites and stuff like that.
But it's not necessarily for like a Tech 1 ammo stack or whatever. Like, you need to just like have fun with it. So we've talked about like maybe there's you have to download like onto a USB chip something if it's rare, and you actually have to move that, kind of like taking a Plex from the vault and putting in, like, retaining a little bit of the fantasy of like the loss, because I think that is fun. But like,
I mean, making them expire is like a way to clean it up, but it only solves one aspect of the problem, right? Like, I think that, and this may be like my own perspective because I've got thousands of research blueprints at this point, but like, I would love to see a better way to manage your blueprint correct. I would love to be able to like open up the ship browser and pick a ship and have it automatically pull it up in the industry window with my blueprints and say like, oh, you do have that at blueprint, you don't have that at blueprint, or look at a fit and be like, you can build all these different pieces of that fit, you know, like more industrial awareness tools or management tools or integration in that sense. I think that would be really cool. We have a tool on our website that allows like members to request blueprints from other people. So like our API, I registered my blueprints so people can put in requests for me to copy the blueprints for them, for our members. So we do stuff like that. And I think it would be cool to somehow integrate that more into the game, because like, so what really, like, each blueprint has runs, copies, each blueprint copy has runs and their current MENT and its location and all sorts of stuff like that. But ultimately, like, we'll need like multiple of them in order to be able to run multiple runs. And like, some of them are owned by the corp, some of them are owned by players. I feel like there's something there. There is a lot of friction in the maintenance and working with blueprints that ends up with things like them needing to be on contract, them being this kind of, everybody ends up with just a shit ton of copies of all kinds of different things that they don't really need. Everybody's always trying to give me stacks of capital BPCs because it'll be useful to somebody, you know, whatever. Like, there's something there. I just don't know 100% where we could make improvements. And like I said, there's some really important aspects to the gameplay, i.e. the protection of it, and the logistics of it, that definitely need to be kept in mind if we are going to do like a rework of how blueprints work, to make sure we preserve those goals.
Like, I think this would like make a lot of stuff like way more accessible and fun for a new player.
Like, for instance, so 2 Atrons, 2 BPC. So like right now, if I want to build 20 Atrons, I can get 4 BPCs of 5, and then I can run that as 4 lines. But if I have 1 BPC of 20, then I can only run that as 1 line. So I have to have these extra BPCs and kind of split them out into numbers, which is like part of the decision process of making a copy. But is that even necessary? If you had 2 blueprints that have the same exact ME, TE, and type that it's built for, shouldn't you be able to just split those or merge them as much as you want? You know, if I've got 2 BPCs with 5 runs each of H-runs at 1020, why can't I just make that one BPC of 10, and then if I need to, like, run it, either split it or run it as multiple times or whatever. Like, I feel like there's a certain amount of like multiplication of BPCs that if BPCs are ending up being a problem, isn't contributing to the actual industry gameplay. It'd be cool if we could just have, like, here's the original, and here's all of the runs that we have copied of that original, right? Instead of each individual BPC having its own set of runs and its own unique world that can't be merged with other BPCs of exactly the same type. Right, yeah, exactly. And make them, like, right now when you put in a run, like, that BPC gets locked into that run. We could break out the whole idea of having, like, a BPO can only be done in one thing at a time. But a BPC, like, your stack of BPCs should just be like BPCs, right? And it would almost even be cool if, I honestly think that the BP, like, the most extreme version of this would be, I would say that BPOs should be a physical item no matter what. I would be willing to be convinced that BPCs could be a digital currency, could be a non-physical currency, could be a resource that you have, or that the corp has, that isn't necessarily tied to a specific location. Now, obviously, getting copies from the Blueprint original to where you want to build with can be a consideration. Like, if you want to keep your BPO safe, you'll want to copy them in HiSec and then move them to, like, wormhole space if you want to use them in wormhole space or something like that. But I feel like, A, that process is trivial enough, and B, is still replicated enough with things like faction and other BPCs that cannot just be copied, that you're not really losing much by having it be that way. And I think it could be very interesting, especially for, like I said, not necessarily like faction BPCs. Oof. See, there's a lot of edge cases. This is a much more complex issue than a simple answer. But I think that BPCs could go more towards the digital way and definitely preserve BPOs as being a thing that you must protect, preserve, and defend. Maybe make it so you can make a BPC from a fully researched BPO. No, I don't like that, because there's plenty of other things, especially at the higher end, where it's like, especially like you buy a brand new, like not the Babaraga, the Upwell hauler comes out, right? Or the Upwell freighter comes out. The decision to research ME versus begin production immediately, or how much to research before you begin production, becomes a very interesting problem. So I still like the idea that, like, as long as they have the same exact stats, ME, TE, and type, then they should be able to basically be pooled together. But I almost would like to see, like, open up a UI that shows all my BPCs, not as individuals, but as products, right? Be like, oh, I have, if I look at Atron, I have 14 runs at 1020 and 5 runs at 10.0, right? So that's kind of where I was thinking, which is why I want, like, BPCs to be more digital. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting thought.
I'm personally like I'm always a dwarf in games, and I like crafting, I like resource gathering. So I'm like
Dwarf
like,
hunter.
Exactly. So it's just like, I like doing this. I like having the recipe. I feel that it kind of marks my progression in some way, how many collections I have or whatever. So I think it's just like core to an MMORPG to have, like, oversight of my blueprints. And I think I'd love to try to fix that, like, by the end of this journey.
It sounds like something that, you know, if we weren't this far in, could be redesigned basically from the ground up. But obviously, this is just such an integral part of the game now, so everything needs to be sensitive. But I agree with this, because also, like, when opening up the contract,
ironically enough, BPCs and BPOs are closer to a global market because of their requirement to be on contracts. You can see them from anywhere. Like I said, I don't know if I'm willing to make BPCs fully digital. I like the idea of, like, part of the thing is that I think that the industry window is trying to do too much at the same time, and I think that it'd be cool for you to be able to browse your blueprint library and availability outside of just the constraints of I'm trying to like the industry window of what I'm trying to build right now. Like the example I had earlier was like, while looking at your ship fitting window, maybe there's a thing that shows you that you have BPCs available for it or something like that. Like, you know, if we do T2 production, maybe I should be able to pull up a fit and not only see if I have all the skills to do it, but whether or not the corporation has all of the BPCs to do it. Again, these are kind of niche things, and like I'm not sure whether or not it's worth the development time per se, but like that's the kind of things I'm thinking about. Like, I don't know.
Right. If I'm there day 2, you know, I'm on the air career program to get somewhere. I do believe we get a good blueprint in there though, but if not, you go into the contracts and you know.
Well, like just a little symbol, and like, or it could be really cool for like a corporation manager to see that like our stockpiles show that we don't have this. Like it maybe like we'd be able to look at something and see what our stockpiles are, see what our BPCs are, and you know, all that stuff, and then right from there, right click it and create opportunities, corp projects directly out of that window, so that way we can like look at the project, see what we have progress on, and then create the projects for the pieces that are still missing. Right? This is a management perspective, not an individual production perspective.
You have a blueprint copy and a blueprint choice, and
I was thinking like not necessarily for the fitting window, but in the same way as like when you're looking at the fitting, you got a little check mark that shows that you have the skills. There could be other icons to show that you have the ability to produce it, for example.
And when you get the copy, it's like 10 runs, there's efficiency, there's time. There's like, why does this cost 10 times more than this? And it's not in a, like the market hub where I can see, you know, oh yeah, the item is, you know, 20% cheaper next door or whatever. And it's confusing and it's scary kind of.
Very scary. It shouldn't be.
What about you, Swift? Do you have something?
Like, it could be cool if like, so we could designate as a corporation where our blueprint library is. And so we point it to that, and that gives a UI that allows people to do stuff with it and maybe even print copies off of it that is like more protected. Because we've tried to do things like this before, and like with the permission systems and the container systems and all that stuff, it wouldn't be cool if the corporation can own a bunch of BPOs. We put them in a specific hangar in a specific place, and we designate that as the library. And then anyone who's in the corp could actually just run copies off of it as long as it's not actively in use. And like corporation directors can cancel people's projects for them, or, you know, off of it if they need to manually override it. But like as long as the BPO is available for copies, you can just go in and copy it, and it drops into your item hangar as a member of the corporation because that's available, right? Like that would be a good way to like reduce friction in the management of BPOs.
Yeah, I mean, so I really love the idea of...
Would it be more useful to combine material? I think that the research system is interesting and valuable. I wouldn't necessarily change the research system. Runs, again, like, so there's a balance because basically the amount of time it takes to produce it and the amount of time to make a run is balanced together. So it's a question of whether or not, like, basically what BPCs allow you to do is kind of front load the time requirement for a thing, right? Instead of building it right now, we can like pre-build it by making a copy. But that also takes time. And so like, again, there's gameplay there and there's decisions there. So I don't necessarily like the process of making runs, I think is valuable. It's the maintenance of those runs that ends up being a problem. Would be an interesting feature for an ISK sync. Use NPCs to handle what you're just talking about for a fee, or trust castlers to not screw you. Well, that's why I was saying like this would be corporation management because corporations are supposed to be handled on trust.
The like a blueprint marketplace type thing, and the way you were talking about it, this is also kind of how players try to arrange it themselves. Like they'll throw their...
You also need to consider the amount of runs multiplies the ME savings. I agree. I think that is not a sufficiently good reason to cause people to fragment out the BP. Like if they didn't say that the biggest load on the database was BPOs and BPCs, then that might be a good argument. But I would say that like that is a relatively minute like thing to preserve, as opposed to allowing people to just condense like copies into copy. Well, again, Nixie, so the goal here would be like you'd be able to run your BPCs in parallel. It's just you would now have one pool of runs instead of having to decide whether or not you're going to split them into copies or not. Because the thing is that by basically the current run system encourages you to have multiple copies of a BPC instead of one big BPC. And the database would much prefer you to have one big BPC. So we should actually move towards having big BPCs and having that be usable by people, than encouraging people to have split BPCs, because that's just more of a load, right?
Very expensive blueprint originals into a station container inside a corp hanger with a very specific access. You can only read from it, can't really move it, but you can still kind of access it. So it's kind of already there. But really, what I think
he's talking about what I was just talking about.
And this is something that you've talked about, CCP Ratati, is having like more granularity in the market when it comes to like taxing structures.
Yeah.
Like just different types of commodities clumped together. So like maybe it's cheaper to trade ammo, but if you're trading Plex, it would be at like a different kind of rate. And just having just more control over that and making the market a little bit more engaging without it being like every single item has a different tax bracket. Like that would be insane. But like the different groups having a little bit more.
They like that. So that is a very like, we run a free-to-play game, blah, blah, blah. Like having a bunch of different tax brackets, the big advantage to CCP is that means that they can like make a weekend where frigates are 0% taxes or whatever, right? Like they can do different kinds of specials, which allows them to have more specials and more varieties of specials happening at different times.
Yes.
Which can be cool.
I think that would,
especially if that is related to, like, if they can tie that into mechanics of the game. Like one of the things I've always thought about is like, as an empire loses in faction warfare, perhaps the rewards in that faction warfare go up, but the taxes on those structures go up too, as the empire is attempting to raise additional funds.
like open up like trading a little bit more.
It should be as simple as possible, but variations are where niches are born and opportunities are born.
Especially probably in player-owned structures where you could have variety, kind of chosen by the
Yes.
Yeah,
players.
exactly. So yeah, maybe, and then you can have fun with like, oh, maybe in Minmatar space, Minmatar ships like are a little.
A good example of this is actually like industry fees, right? Industry fees go up dynamically based on the amount of industry jobs that are being done in that area. So we already have things like this in different levels. Like, I think that there are room for that. It's just about building that dynamicism into the system. Like right now, the entirety of the market is assuming the fact that there's basically one fee, two, whatever, the fees that exist. The idea of it being a granular thing is just would be a lot of work more than anything.
A little bit taxed a little bit less and things like that.
Yeah, you're on. If there's a specific goal that a group, a corporation, or alliance or something is trying to reach, is it deployment in mining form, or is it a war or something like that? Is there no tax on doctrine related stuff to either the mining or
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's great. You're making a great a case for a tax code change.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I struggle with this internally and externally to like sell some of these tax code improvements. Looks
And also, like, fiddling with taxes, like, being a tax accountant, look, this is, guess what? This is EVE Online is a game about real systems, right? Like, there's a reason why a guy was able to found a Fortune 500 company after playing EVE for a long time. It's all, like, on the industry side especially, that's what this game is all about, is about supply lines and market fluctuations and forces and blah, blah, blah. And taxes is a part of that. That's a part of it.
luxury tax or kind of like VAT in some way.
Yeah, I kind of zoned out just at the word tax. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's not super sexy to be like, oh man.
Well, industry side is already extremely hostile to new players, but at the same time, though, what's fun is that adding in more complexity in this case actually can make things easier for new players. As like the changes that they made to the industry program or to the industry system actually did help newer players, because the more niches there are, the more likelihood that there's something relatively simple that a new player can get in on if they figure it out early on. It's easier for them to get a victory. Right now, given like if it's a solved system, then those new players are directly competing with all of the people that have already solved the system. But if it's a constantly shifting system, then a player that engages with that system will be able to find opportunities, you know?
So where does that turn into exploding spaceships is all I want to know.
That's the idea.
Like a couple of accountants would probably get like really excited by it, but like our brand team's probably like,
I am
dudes, what are you thinking about? Like we can't have a tax expansion.
No, we
We'll make it
struggle with the
April
LP
15th.
tax.
You know
LP
what?
taxes was
Yes,
impossible.
Yes, we could. Let's do it. It would be an insane kind of way to just go out into the world and say EVE's economy is so big and so cool that we made a special expansion to the game around taxes.
Yep. I like it.
I mean, gate fees already exist.
I'm not going to do that. I think it's time for us to wrap this one up. Ratati, Swift, thank you guys so much for coming around and explaining this. Now I don't need to read the devlog. I can just listen to, well, I don't need to listen to it again, but you know what I mean.
I think you'll be able to find opportunities, but normal new players won't. Well, realize that like every day I'm talking to new players in order to help them find these sorts of opportunities. So I'm not like completely out of the, whatever. But I also remember like what it was like 10 years ago versus now, as far as like answering these questions about like what to build as T1 and, all those sorts of things. So, no, because like the fact that there are simple things to learn, like it used to be that it's just, building T1 ships is just useless or whatever. But like more so now with things happening, like you can look at like a new player can still pay attention. Right. And in fact, a newer player might be paying attention more closely to something than the experienced players that already are set in their ways to be able to do it. Like new players are looking for a thing to get into. But if everything's already established, then there's nothing for them to get into. There's nothing for them to find. If there's always shifting things, then there's always a thing that's happening now that if they get in on it, they can like do good about it. Right. Thanks, Jeff. But yeah, I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comments below. And let's go ahead and keep this discussion because obviously this is going to be kind of an ongoing thing as we enter into this new world of prosperity or whatever in EVE Online. The Plex changes are happening on the 7th, which hopefully I'll get this edited and out before then, or I'll probably try to release this about then. But this was, I think, a bigger discussion about what this means and how we can evaluate EVE Online and kind of how CCP is looking at it, how the player base looks at it, and how we can see it as like a set of systems that need to be healthy. I think that this was a good conversation and good discussion. I appreciate everybody who's participated in it. And like I said, please leave comments down below if you have any more thoughts. I feel like this is something we're going to keep talking about for a little while. But all that said, I have been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put even into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for watching, checking out the stream, and liking, commenting, and subscribing. Doing all of those are very, very important for the algorithm and for you, so that way you get the latest in my news. If you're watching this as an edited video, please be aware that we do record these live most weekdays. Go ahead and join the Discord and give yourself as interested in YouTube if you want those if you want updates as soon as they come out. And also feel free to come and join on the Discord and just hang out with us, ask questions, whatever. As long as you're polite and nice, then we'd love to have you there. And of course, the Convocation of Empyreans is recruiting. You can use, we are here to maximize player engagement with EVE Online, and we would be happy to have you here with us. If you are new or returning to EVE and you have not gotten your 1,000,000 free skill points, please consider using the link down below or in the chat in order to get your free 1,000,000 skill points. It does help those who help make the show and the convocation possible. And of course, I want to thank personally my top tier or immortal tier supporters: 745 NPSI, Arydanika the Queen, Bad Boy Smooth, Evo Elite, Erladis, Elange, Flash Gordon, May, Malak Starfire, Malin, Mercuton, Mayak, Nephilim, LM1, Sheesh, and Rid. Thank you guys so much, and thank you to all of you who have watched this video, liked the stream, shared it with a friend, because we are here to increase player literacy, because this is actually a big thing that we just talked about. You know, a lot of this, it's not just about EVE being a good game, it's about players being aware of how things work, players being good, like, players, as in knowledgeable players, making meaningful decisions within the game, because a better player base equals a better EVE Online. So thank you guys so much for helping me in our project to raise the literacy of EVE Online within the player base. And with all that said, I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and until next time, I'll see you in space. And I think that that's actually going to be it for today. We do have a corp meeting this weekend. If you're still in the corp, or if you are in the corp, rather, I should say, it's going to be a big one. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next weekend, or next week. Make sure to go check out CCP's stream, so that way you get the rattlesnake skin. All right. Have a good one, guys.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city